Chapter 2438. Boom, boom. In the void, under the illumination of the crimson lava, two dark fist shadows roared like dragons and shook the heavens and earth. Bang, bang. In the next instant, the two fists collided with each other and a muffled sound was heard, followed by an explosion. One of the fist shadows was shattered. Boom. Boundless energy surged and turned into dark energy that struck the void. The surrounding lava cliffs were ignited with tongues of fire that were dozens of meters long. At the same time, 5 figures were sent flying and smashed into the lava cliffs. As for the other silver figure, dark energy surged around him, making him look like a fiend god descending to the world. He had a supreme posture, looking down on the world. One punch. With just one punch, Nietian had severely injured the 5 Dark Emperor subbodies. The 7 city lords were dumbfounded by the scene in front of them. Their eyes trembled violently, and they were completely speechless. The power that Nietian had displayed was even stronger than that of a peak immortal state warrior. After one punch, the 5 Dark Emperor subbodies were all severely injured. The Dark Emperor subbodies are just SOSO. Nie Tianling said coldly and stepped forward. His body was filled with dark energy and murderous intent. The 5 subbodies crawled out of the lava cliffs. Their bodies were covered in blood, and their auras were weak, as if they were going to disappear at any time. Nie Tian's punch had severely injured the 5 subbodies, and they were on the verge of death. At this moment, they had no strength to resist at all. However, at this moment, Nietian suddenly felt that the god-fiend power in his body had suddenly weakened. He frowned in confusion. Nietian. Immediately afterwards, a weak voice echoed in his ears. It was none other than Qi Wu Yunxiu. Mother. Nietian turned around and saw Qi Wu Yunxiu's body trembling. The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains on her body were tightening bit by bit, causing her great pain. Seeing this, Nietian's figure flashed over. However, this time, the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains did not react and continued to flow back into Qi Wu Yunxiu's body. Qi Wu Yunxiu's body trembled even more violently. Her face was contorted in agony. Oh no! Suddenly, the fat cat's voice rang out. She cried out in alarm, her deep blue eyes trembling. Fatty, what happened? Nietian cried out in alarm. He was extremely anxious, but he didn't dare to act rashly. He didn't know what had happened, but he was afraid that his actions would only make the situation worse. Qi Wu Yunxiu fell into an even more intense pain, but the fat cat seemed to be stunned and did not speak for a long time. Fatty, what's going on? Nietian's eyes trembled as he growled. He vaguely sensed that something bad was about to happen. Nietian. The fat cat finally spoke. His voice was trembling violently as he tried his best to control his tongue. Your mother might not be able to make it. Can't make it? Nietian's eyes suddenly trembled, and the blood in his body flowed in reverse. He looked like he was about to lose his mind. He roared, What do you mean? What do you mean? The fat cat's expression froze when he saw Nietian's intense reaction. He suddenly felt that Qi Wu Yunxiu's strength had suddenly weakened, and her aura had become unstable. Even the bone-eroding soul, shackling chains, could not help her maintain the stability of her aura. Qi Wu Yunxiu must have used too much of her strength to help Nietian control the seal in her body. That was why she suffered the backlash from the seal. Because the person who controlled the seal was Qi Wu Yunxiu, not Nietian. The person who suffered the backlash was also Qi Wu Yunxiu. The strength of the seal in Nietian's body was unknown to Nietian, not to mention Qi Wu Yunxiu. Even the fat cat could only make a guess. Qi Wu Yunxiu could no longer hold on after suffering the backlash from the seal. At this moment, Qi Wu Yunxiu could no longer endure the ravages of the bone-corroding soul, shackling chains. In the end, she would only die. Nietian, don't force yourself. At this moment, Qi Wu Yunxiu's voice was heard. There was a hint of relief in her voice. I'm already very satisfied to be able to see you before I die. Mother, I won't allow you to say such things. Nietian's eyes were filled with tears. He shouted, I won't allow you to give up. I won't allow you to die. I won't give up, and you can't give up either." As he spoke, Nyetian took a step forward and grabbed the two bone, eroding soul shackling chains with both hands. He forcefully pulled them back so that the cursed shackling chains wouldn't return to Chiwu Yunxio's body. He knew that if all 9 bone, eroding soul shackling chains returned to Chiwu Yunxio's body, she would be dead for sure. Sizzle. The moment his body touched the bone, eroding soul shackling chains, the soul shackling flames on the cursed shackling chains burned his skin, making an ear-piercing sound. Nyetian's arms were instantly set ablaze. His flesh was instantly burned, and his bones could be seen clearly. It was unimaginable how painful it was to have one's flesh and blood burned. However, Nyetian didn't care at all. Starlight energy surged out of his body and forcefully pulled back the bone, eroding soul shackling chains. What he was holding onto was not the bone-eroding soul shackling chains, but his mother's life. No matter how painful it was, how could he let go? At that moment, the two bone-eroding soul shackling chains suddenly became violent. The soul shackling flames exploded, and the flames spread to Nyetian's entire body, burning him up. Lord Nyetian, seeing this scene, the 7 city lords cried out in surprise, their expressions lifeless. The scene in front of them was too shocking. Nyetian would rather have his body burned than let go. Nyetian, let go, let go. Chiwu Yunxio saw Nyetian's body burning, and she used the last bit of her strength to scream. Her voice was heart-wrenching, and it made one's soul tremble. As a mother, how could she stand by and watch her own child being burned alive? The 5 Dark Emperor's subbodies were dumbfounded. Their shocked eyes seemed to be saying, "Is he crazy?" In the eyes of the 5 subbodies, Chiwu Yunxio's aura was too weak, and she was definitely a dead person. Was Nyetian crazy? He was using his own life to save someone who was going to die. Nyetian was not crazy, because the person he was saving was his mother. Even if it was impossible, he would never let go. "I won't let go." Nyetian's body was covered in flames, and he roared. Every word shook the heavens and earth. "Nyetian, let go, or you will die." Chiwu Yunxio's body trembled, and tears flowed out of her eyes. "Even if I die, I won't let go." Nyetian roared. He allowed his body to burn in the soul-shackling flames, but his hands were still holding on to the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains, not letting the chains move. Fat Cat was stunned when she saw Nyetian's determination. QL11 at that moment, he seemed to have thought of something. His blue eyes trembled, and he exclaimed, "I have an idea." "What idea?" Nyetian roared, and his burning eyes surged with unconcealable fanaticism. "Spell transfer," Fat Cat exclaimed, but his expression was complicated. Chapter 2439. Fat Cat had just come up with the idea of transferring the curse. He saw that Nyetian's body was engulfed in flames, and the bone-eroding soul-shackling chain seemed to be merging with his body. QL11, the bone-eroding soul-shackling chain, could not be removed or destroyed, so the only way was to transfer it. As long as Chiwu Yunxio could endure the moment the bone-eroding soul-shackling chain was transferred, she would survive. However, to Nyetian, enduring the bone-eroding soul-shackling chain was a huge risk. Would his current martial body be able to withstand the burden of the bone-eroding soul-shackling chain? Let's begin." Nyetian immediately understood Fat Cat's intention and shouted. Chiwu Yunxio could not hold on for much longer, so no matter what Fat Cat was going to do, he had to hurry. "All right." Fat Cat nodded and appeared. He had no other choice but to transfer the curse. Nyetian could not watch his mother die, so he would persevere until the end. If that was the case, the final result would be Nyetian and Chiwu Yunxio dying together. Transferring the curse. This was Nyetian and Chiwu Yunxio's last chance. "Nyetian, you have to hold on and stay conscious," Fat Cat said. Sense the soul-shackling chain and slowly absorb the curse. Nyetian nodded vigorously. Yeah, he had already made all the necessary preparations. Little Fat Cat didn't waste any more words. With a sway of its fat body, an endless amount of colored glass chi was released, enveloping Nyetian. In the next moment, Nyetian felt the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain penetrate into his body. The sudden, excruciating pain made him let out a miserable shriek. Nyetian, what are you doing? Chiwu Yunxiu was stunned for a moment, then immediately reacted and shouted, No, I don't want you to bear the pain of the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain for me. But was already too late. Under the stimulation of the azure chi, the cursed shackles had already begun to shift. This brat wants to transfer the cursed shackles to himself. On the other side, the 5 sub-bodies of the Dark Emperor reacted and cried out in alarm, their eyes trembling. They had never imagined that Nyetian would be so crazy as to transfer the cursed shackles to himself. Lord Nyetian, this. The 7 city lords were also stunned, and they were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Nyetian's action was also out of their expectations. At that moment, the cursed shackles started to withdraw from Chiwu Yunxiu's body and slowly merged with Nyetian's body. Nyetian felt as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. Every bone in his body, every meridian, every drop of blood seemed to be on fire. The pain seeped into his bones, causing his facial features to contort. But he didn't make any sound and silently endured all the pain. Chiwu Yunxiu felt that the pain of the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain in her body was gradually weakening, but the pain in her heart was getting more and more intense. Stop him! At that moment, one of the sub-bodies shouted and stepped out, trying to stop Nyetian from transferring the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. Don't let anyone come near. Fat Cat suddenly looked at the 7 city lords and shouted. The 7 city lords reacted in unison and blocked the sub-body of the Dark Emperor. At that moment, the 5 sub-bodies of the Dark Emperor were all severely injured and were no match for the 7 city lords. Nyetian wholeheartedly focused on transferring the cursed shackles, not caring about anything else. At that moment, as the 9 bone-eroding soul-shackling chains were gradually removed, the flames around Chiwu Yunxiu's body gradually weakened, and her original appearance was revealed. Her body was trembling slightly, and the tears in her eyes were already flowing down her cheeks. The 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains gradually merged into Nyetian's body, and on his body, 9 blood-colored wounds appeared. It was a ghastly sight. Nyetian, you must hold on. Fat Cat felt that Nyetian's aura was weakening, and her nerves were tense as she said in a deep voice. Nyetian's body was burning with the scorching soul-shackling flame, and wounds kept appearing on his body. His entire body was already full of holes. Bang! 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 On the other side, a series of muffled sounds rang out, and the 5 sub-bodies of the Dark Emperor exploded, dying on the spot. These 5 were already severely injured, and facing the 7 city lords, they were quickly killed. Qi Lan and the others stabilized themselves and looked at Nyetian nervously. They also didn't know what would happen next. After a long time, the last sound was heard, and the 9 bone-eroding soul-shackling chains completely merged into Nyetian's body. At this moment, Chiwu Yunxiu got rid of the pain that had been following her for a long time. However, the pain in her heart was even more intense. At this moment, she had returned to her original appearance, which was an extremely beautiful face. Her body was covered with a layer of glazed chi, but one could still vaguely see her perfect figure. Chiwu Yunxiu's aura was very weak, but it was very stable, and her life was no longer in danger. However, Nyetian's situation was very bad. Even though his martial body was strong, the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains was beyond imagination, and it had caused a great impact on his martial body and soul. When Chiwu Yunxiu was suffering from the cursed shackles, her strength was close to the peak of the immortal state, and she was much stronger than Nyetian. Nyetian. Chiwu Yunxiu moved to Nyetian's side. Mother, I am fine. Nyetian opened his eyes slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up into a smile. Then he stretched out his hand, and a ball of white light surged out from his palm. It was the power of the earth vein source. Before Chiwu Yunxiu could react, Nietian had already transferred the power of the earth vein source into her body. This is the earth elemental power of origin. Chiwu Yunxiu was stunned, and her beautiful eyes trembled, and tears flowed down her cheeks again. Even under such circumstances, Nietian still cared about her, and transferred the power of life into her body. Mother, let's leave this place first. Nietian endured the pain of his body being torn apart, and said with a deep voice. He was still conscious, but the 9-bone, eroding, soul-shackling chains were constantly battering his body, and he was constantly suffering from heart-wrenching pain. Chiwu Yunxiu nodded. Nietian did not say anything else. He flipped his palm, and a space ring appeared in his palm. Chiwu Yunxiu took out a piece of clothing from the ring and put it on. The azure chi around her immediately dissipated. Nietian, I am too tired. I will go back first. Fat Cat said after seeing that everything had calmed down and its figure disappeared. Fat Cat had used up a large amount of azure chi to transfer the cursed shackles, and it urgently needed a rest. Mother, let's go. Nietian looked at Chiwu Yunxiu and nodded. He then moved and flew into the sky above the abyss. Boom! However, at this moment, a vast and powerful aura suddenly appeared in the sky. Like a landslide and a tsunami, it crashed down with a loud bang. Nietian suddenly felt an enormous pressure bearing down on him, causing his eyes to tremble involuntarily. Bang! In the next moment, before he could react, he was hit by the powerful aura, and his body was smashed into the ground like a giant rock. Nietian. Chiwu Yunxiu was taken aback by the sudden turn of events. Then, he let out a cry and reached out to grab Nietian. The two of them stopped just a few meters away from the lava lake. You can't leave. At that moment, a powerful voice rang out. Chapter 2440. In the air above the abyss, a black-clothed figure descended. His body surged with boundless darkness energy. The terrifying darkness energy was boundless, as if it could devour everything. It made one feel a strong sense of suppression. Dark Emperor. The 7 city lords were stunned for a few seconds before they finally spoke. Their expressions were extremely shocked. The face of the person in front of them was exactly the same as the 6 Dark Emperor subbodies. However, this person's aura was much stronger than the Dark Emperor subbodies. Without a doubt, this person was the Dark Emperor himself. 7 city lords, why don't you kneel in front of me? The Dark Emperor said with a cold smile on his face. His eyes were filled with arrogance. The 7 city lords trembled in fear. Their backs were drenched in cold sweat, and their bodies trembled uncontrollably. Since you won't kneel, then die. The Dark Emperor didn't waste any time and spoke once more. He reached out with one hand, and a darkness energy surged out, forming a ghostly claw in the air that grabbed at the 7 city lords. The 7 city lords were stunned. Just as they wanted to resist, they were shocked to find that countless black trees had appeared around them. Like tentacles, they wrapped around them and couldn't move at all. Boom! In the next moment, the ghostly claw descended. The Dark Emperor clenched his fist, and a terrifying power descended. The 7 city lords' bodies shrank, as if they were about to be squeezed to death. The Dark Emperor was simply too strong. The 7 city lords were completely powerless in front of him. The 7 city lords' bodies were squeezed together, and they were about to be squeezed to death. Stop! Just at that moment, a low roar sounded out. A figure covered in flames appeared. It was Nietian. QL, 11-inch godly demon origin embryo kid. The Dark Emperor's eyes darkened and locked onto Nietian cold. Dark Emperor. Nietianling replied coldly. His body trembled, and all the power in his body surged. He said in a low voice, "The person you want is me. Let them go." Sure. The corner of the Dark Emperor's mouth twitched. With a wave of his hand, the 7 city lords were sent flying and smashed into the lava cliff. It was unknown if they were dead or alive. The Dark Emperor looked at Nietian coldly and said with a playful expression, "Brat, you have truly amazed this emperor. I really didn't expect that all 6 of my subbodies would die at your hands. If I hadn't come here personally, I'm afraid I would have let you escape. Run?" Niet Tianling laughed. His eyes were as fierce as a wolf's as he said coldly, "Would I run before I kill you?" It was all thanks to the Dark Emperor that Chiwu Yunxiu had endured so much pain. Niet Tian vowed to kill the Dark Emperor. "Kill me?" The Dark Emperor sneered, as if he had heard the funniest joke. He looked at Niet Tian with disdain and said with a high and mighty attitude, "With just you?" Right now, the Dark Sovereign's aura was comparable to the peak martial artists of the Nine Realms. Niet Tian, on the other hand, was only a mid-stage paramount god. The gap between the two of them was like the distance between heaven and earth. It would be as difficult as scaling the heavens for Niet Tian to kill the Dark Emperor. However, Niet Tian's eyes were filled with determination as he replied, "With just me? Humph, humph, humph." Suddenly, the Dark Emperor laughed. His laughter was filled with contempt and ridicule. He had no idea where a mid-stage paramount god could get such confidence from. "Brat, you just absorbed the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains," the Dark Emperor said coldly. "You won't even be able to survive, much less kill me. Let's see how you plan to kill me." The Dark Emperor's eyes flickered with a cold light. "By the way, do you know who this emperor is?" Niet Tian's eyes narrowed, and a look of confusion flickered across his face. "I don't care who you are. You're going to die today." "You sure talk big, kid," the Dark Emperor sneered. The Dark Emperor sneered and said solemnly, "Even the ancestors of the Nye family and the Chiwu family would not dare to say such words. You should ask your mother who this emperor is." Niet Tian frowned, and his face fell. When the Dark Emperor mentioned the ancestor of the Nye family and the ancestor of the Qi family, he seemed to be from the same era as the latter two. Just who was the Dark Emperor? "Yuli, if you want more power, I can give you the extreme demon embryo, but please let Niet Tian go." Just as Niet Tian was surprised, Qi Wu's figure appeared. She stared at the Dark Emperor with her beautiful eyes and said in a deep voice, "Yuli." Niet Tian's eyes widened when he heard the name. The first thing he thought of was the Yu clan, one of the 9 great clans of Genesis. The fact that the Dark Emperor could fuse with the origin power of Wood meant that he was most likely from one of the 9 great clans. The fact that he mentioned the ancestors of the Nye clan and the Chiwu clan meant that he was acquainted with them. With that in mind, the identity of the Dark Emperor was very clear. He was the ancestor of the Yu clan. Niet Tian was right. The Dark Emperor's real name was Yu Li, and he was the ancestor of the Yu clan, one of the 9 great clans of Genesis. Niet Tian's face fell when he thought of this. He was surprised that the ancestor of the Yu clan was still alive and appeared in the dark prison as the Dark Emperor. Extreme demon embryo? Yu Li sneered. He glanced at Chiwu Yunxiu and looked at Niet Tian. "There's a god-fiend embryo here. Why would I be interested in the extreme demon embryo?" Yuli knew that the god-fiend embryo was much more powerful than the extreme demon embryo. Since he could get the god-fiend embryo, why would he be interested in the extreme demon embryo? "Yuli, you hate the Chiwu clan. Why did you attack Niet Tian?" Chiwu Yunxiu frowned and said coldly, "He's your son. Doesn't the Chiwu clan's blood flow in his body?" Yuli smiled Chiwu Yunxiu and said, "Chiwu Yunxiu, you should know that I tortured you because you're from the Chiwu clan. I have an irreconcilable feud with Qi Wuxiong. Since he's dead, I can only blame it on his descendants. So today, you and your son will die here." Qi Wuxiong was the name of the Chiwu clan's ancestor. Yu Li and Qi Wuxiong had a deep feud. That's why he tortured Chiwu Yunxiu. "You torture my mother because you have a feud with the Chiwu clan's ancestor?" Niet Tian's eyes darkened, and his expression was murderous. "That's right." Yuli smiled coldly and said in a deep voice, "Actually, Chiwu Yunxiu can be considered lucky. This emperor only imprisoned her, let her suffer a little, and let her live. The Qi Sha you saw earlier was the most miserable person I've ever killed." Niet Tian's eyes narrowed. He didn't know what kind of feud Yuli had with Qi Sha. "Kid, you're here to save Qi Sha, right?" Yuli smiled and said, "Then you should know that Qi Sha is from the ancient Ming tribe." "So what if I know?" Niet Tianling replied coldly. "Aren't you curious why I became the Dark Emperor of the Dark Ocean?" Yuli smiled again and asked in a deep voice, If you have something to say, just say it. Yet Tian calmed down a lot. He was curious to hear what Yuli had to say. Chapter 2441. Niet Tian was taken aback when he heard Yu Li's words. He didn't expect that Yu Li, the strongest and most powerful person in the Dark Sea prison, was actually a prisoner of the Dark Sea prison. He also didn't expect that the person who imprisoned Yu Li was the Netherworld Emperor. What had happened between the Netherworld Emperor and Yu Li? No wonder Yu Li had tortured Qi Sha, robbed him of his eyes, used the scaled demon evil art to turn him into a scaled demon, and even controlled his consciousness to turn him into a killing machine. All of this was because of the Netherworld Emperor. Niet Tian had heard a little about the ancient Ming race's invasion of the Nine Realms. However, he didn't know the specifics. Young man, are you curious? Yuli looked at Niet Tian and laughed. Since you were about to die, I might as well tell you a few things. Yuli began to recount the events of the distant past. When the ancient Ming race invaded the Nine Realms, they were unstoppable and unstoppable. The first place that the Netherworld Emperor conquered wasn't the Nine Realms, but the Dark Sea Prison. The Dark Sea Prison was located between the Nine Realms. At that time, there were 9 space-time gates in the prison that led to the Nine Realms. Therefore, the Netherworld Emperor used the Dark Sea Prison as a base to conquer the Nine Realms. It didn't take long before the Netherworld Emperor led the ancient Ming army to conquer 8 realms. The 9 great clans had no choice but to form an alliance. The leader of the alliance was the Qi family's ancestor, Qi Wuxiong. Qi Wuxiong didn't want to fight the Netherworld Emperor head-on. He wanted to sue for peace. He sent a messenger to the Dark Sea Black Prison to seek peace, and this messenger was Yu Li. Yu Li and the Netherworld Emperor were about to reach an agreement. The Netherworld Emperor would leave one realm and not invade. However, news came from the Nine Realms that the 9 Great Clans Alliance and the ancient Ming race had started a war. The ancient Ming race had suffered heavy losses. The Netherworld Emperor was enraged by this news. He imprisoned Yu Li and left 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains on him. He also set up a sky-punishing restriction in his body so that he would never be able to step out of the Dark Emperor's Great Hall. Then, the Netherworld Emperor led an army to invade the last realm. However, he never returned. After that, news of the Netherworld Emperor's death spread, and the ancient Ming were expelled from the 9 realms. But Yu Li was forever imprisoned in the Dark Sea Black Prison. Therefore, he hated Qi Wuxiong for betraying him. He hated the Underworld Emperor even more because the latter made him suffer unimaginable pain. Later on, after Yu Li adapted to the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains, he slowly became the Dark Monarch and turned the Dark Sea Prison into a prison shared by all 9 realms. However, no one knew that the greatest prisoner of the Dark Sea Black Prison was none other than Yu Li himself. Yu Li very rarely left the Dark Emperor Hall because he was under the control of the heaven-punishing restriction that the Netherworld Emperor had set up. As soon as he left the Dark Emperor Hall, the heaven-punishing restriction within his body would activate, making him wish he was dead. He was actually risking his life by coming here. So, the bone-eroding soul-shackling chain is something on you. Niet Tian's eyes flickered with murderous intent after hearing Yu Li's words. He said in a deep voice, "And you actually transferred the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain to my mother. The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain is a curse that the Netherworld Emperor used to imprison my strength." Yu Li smiled coldly and said, "I've always wanted to transfer the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. Unfortunately, the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain will only accept a martial physique with a stronger bloodline than its previous host. I have a myriad with divine physique, so my bloodline is very strong. That's why I haven't found a suitable candidate. The 7 murders demon physique repels the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain, so it can't be transferred. Your mother has the extreme demon fetus, so her bloodline is even stronger. She is the best candidate to transfer the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. If it wasn't for the fact that I needed to transfer the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain, I would have taken your mother's extreme demon fetus. I originally thought it was a pity that such a good extreme demon fetus was destroyed by the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. But I didn't expect you to show up. The God-fiend origin embryo is much stronger than the extreme demon fetus. Yuli couldn't help but chuckle coldly. As far as he was concerned, Nietion was already a meal on his plate. So that's how it is. Nietion frowned slightly. No wonder he had a feeling that the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain had taken the initiative to merge with his martial body when he had transferred it. Apparently, the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain was more powerful than the extreme demon fetus. Thankfully, Nietion's god-fiend origin embryo was stronger than the extreme demon fetus. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to transfer the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. Humph. Yuli chuckled coldly, glaring at Nietion. You know everything you need to know, boy. Even if you die now, you'll be able to rest in peace. Die? Nietion chuckled coldly. We haven't even fought yet. Are you really that confident that you can kill me? Young man, you sure are arrogant. Chuckling coldly, Yuli's energy surged as he said, I'm very curious to see how a measly mid-paramount god like you is going to fight me. His berserk voice was filled with arrogance and condescension. Even though Nietion had killed many of the Dark Emperor's subbodies, Yuli still didn't take him seriously. Yuli was a peak expert from the ancient times, and his strength had once been close to that of a half-saint. Even in the Dark Emperor Hall, with the heaven-punishing restriction suppressing his strength, he still had the battle prowess of a peak god. How could Nietion fight him? Mother, sensing Yuli's energy, Nietion couldn't stop himself from backing up. He turned to Chiwu Yunxiu and nodded. Nietion, Chiwu Yunxiu's beautiful eyes flickered, and her pretty face was filled with shock. She knew what Nietion was trying to do. He wanted her to activate the sealing power and awaken the power of 9,000 fiend gods in her god-devil nascent embryo. But now, Nietion's martial body was almost at its limit. If she activated the sealing power now, Nietion's martial body wouldn't be able to handle it. Mother, trust me. Nietion knew that Chiwu Yunxiu was worried about him, so his eyes shone with domineering confidence. Activating the sealing power and awakening the 9,000 fiend gods was Nietion's only chance. Otherwise, he wouldn't stand a chance against Yuli. Have you mother and son finished discussing? Yuli laughed coldly. His arrogance was at its peak as he said madly, This emperor is going to make his move. With that, Yuli's body flickered and he slammed his palm down, causing the void to tremble. Boom! Then, an eerie black-wood ghost claw appeared. Like a curtain that covered the sky, it slammed down on Nietion. The blackwood ghost claw's aura was forceful and sharp, as if it could destroy everything. QL11, if this palm landed, even a peak immortal state powerhouse would be heavily injured. Mother. At the critical moment, Nietion growled, his eyes trembling. With his current strength, there was only one outcome for him to face such a terrifying palm head-on, death. Chiwu Yunxiu's eyes flickered. She was still hesitating. She knew that with Nietion's current physical condition, he couldn't withstand the impact of the sealing power. Actually, Nietion had temporarily awakened the power of 9,000 fiend gods in the past few times, and it was a huge burden on his martial body. Chiwu Yunxiu didn't know what would happen to Nietion if she activated the sealing power again. But now, if she didn't activate the sealing power, Nietion would be killed by Yuli. Between a rock and a hard place, he would die if he advanced or retreated. Chapter 2442. In an instant, Chiwu Yunxiu's brain spun rapidly. Given the current situation, it seemed that no matter what she chose, Nietion would not be able to live. In the next instant, she felt this surging energy in the air. Her beautiful eyes flickered as a strange light flickered in them. At this moment, Nietion felt the fiend god energy in his body exploding madly, condensing into a fiend god armor around his body. Rumble! At the same time, the sharp claws of the blackwood tree slammed down, slamming into the fiend god armor. Nietion's body swayed as he was sent flying. But when he was still in midair, A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. After the wings spread out, he abruptly steadied his body. Yuli couldn't help but exclaim in surprise when he saw the scene in front of him. But he soon understood. He coldly laughed and said, "So this is the power of the fiend god origin embryo. The forbidden fiend god energy in the legends is indeed powerful." Nietion's body stiffened as a trace of blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. After the awakening of 9,000 fiend god energy, he felt as though his entire body was about to explode. But the 9-bone eroding soul refining seals around his body made him feel as though his body was about to explode. If it wasn't for the support of the astral energy, his body would have already exploded into a pool of blood under the violent impact of the fiend god energy. "Mother, are you all right?" Nietion stabilized his body and looked at Chiwu Yunshio as he asked anxiously. Chiwu Yunshio's aura had already stabilized after the bone-eroding soul-refining chains were extracted from her body, and she had also received the energy from Nietion's Terravane source. But now, she had once again activated the sealing energy and suffered a backlash. Blood dripped from the corner of her mouth as her aura became unstable once again. I'm fine," but she forced herself to hold on and waved her hands. "Mother, hang in there. I'll finish this fellow soon." Nietion nodded his head as his gaze turned cold, locking onto Yuli, brat. Yuli's eyes flickered, as if sensing something from Nietion's body. He said solemnly, "I didn't expect your martial body to be able to withstand the power of the fiend god and the bone-eroding soul shackling chains at the same time. Looks like there's something even more terrifying in your body." As a powerful cultivator, how could he not tell that Chiwu Yunshio was helping Nietion forcibly awaken his god-fiend power? Otherwise, there was no way Nietion's strength could be so abnormal. Nietion's martial body was so strong that it surpassed that of a peak paramount god. The power of 9-bone eroding soul shackling chains, in addition to the violent power of 9,000 gods and demons, was still able to withstand it. It was simply abnormal. Yuli sensed that there was an incomparably mysterious power within Nietion's body. It surged around his body and fused with his martial body. It was this power that provided infinite possibilities for Nietion's martial body. However, the aura of this power was very strange, and Yuli had never seen it before. It seemed to be some kind of higher-level power. "Brat, I don't care what's inside of you. Once I kill you, everything you have will be mine." Yuli sneered inwardly. "You can't withstand the wrath of the fiend god." At that moment, Nietion's energy surged, and the power of the fiend god and demons surged out in a terrifying manner. At the same time, he was surrounded by a surging sword will. The fusion of the sword will and the fiend god's power made Nietion's fiend god sword will stronger than ever. Yuli could sense Nietion's sword will, and he couldn't help but frown in surprise. What a strong sword will! He hadn't expected Nietion's sword will to be so powerful. Nietion hovered in the air, the sword will around him so sharp that it seemed like it could tear space itself apart. Human sword slashes the stars. The next moment, he roared, and his figure suddenly moved. Like a graceful swan, he struck out with his sword. Boom! The sword's shadow whistled, and it was nearly 10,000 meters long. It was like a huge mountain, and it attacked Yuli. The surrounding space suddenly shook, as if it was about to collapse. Yuli's eyes narrowed. Obviously, he had underestimated Nietion's strength. However, he didn't panic. His body shook slightly, and suddenly 8 pieces of black wood appeared like 8 black dragons. They rose up and turned into a shield in front of him. Bang! 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 In the next moment, the sword shadow fell and bombarded the 8 pieces of black wood. A series of booming sounds were heard, and the black wood broke into pieces, turning into sawdust. However, the fiend god's sword shadow's momentum slowly weakened under the impact of the black wood. Bang! Finally, when the sword shadow hit the 7th piece of black wood, it collapsed. Nietion's full-strength attack still couldn't break through Yuli's defense. Yuli's figure was forced back 100 meters before he steadied himself. He wasn't injured, but his eyes were full of surprise. Then he calmed down and said in a low voice, "I really didn't expect that you could break through 7 of my defenses in front of my 8 desolate blackwood. I have to say, you've amazed me." Tian steadied himself, and his eyes surged with determination. Yuli's strength was beyond his expectations. This guy was still being suppressed by the heaven-punishing seal, but his battle strength was actually slightly stronger than Ye Dao, Tian Kuei, and the others. He really didn't know how strong this guy would be if the heaven-punishing seal was removed. Nye Tian speculated that Yuli's peak state was at least a half-step saint expert. In fact, this wasn't strange. Strictly speaking, Yuli wasn't from the 9 major realms. The ancestors of the 9 great families of creation had come to the 9 major realms on the orders of the Jueying Temple to find the 9 great origins. Therefore, the 9 ancestors should be people of the abandoned land, so it was normal for them to have the strength of a half-step saint. "Kid, that strike just now was probably your strongest strike." Then Yuli smiled coldly, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold curve. "Next, it's my turn to attack." As his cold voice fell, Yuli's aura surged, and waves of violent power surged. 8 desolate black would once again appeared around his body. The 8 slabs of black would coiled around him like 8 giant snakes. 8 desolate black wood, 8 desolate extermination. In the next moment, Yuli let out a low roar. His body suddenly shook, and 8 black trees swiftly shot out. They were like primordial barbaric beasts galloping, and they gave off a murderous aura as they surged towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he felt the 8 waves of destructive power coming at him. In an instant, he reacted. The demon god's power in his body was released, and the demon god's armor formed around his body. Bang! The moment the demon god's armor formed, the first piece of black wood fell and heavily bombarded the demon god's armor, but it directly shattered. Bang! Then, the second piece of black wood also shattered. Bang! The third piece of black wood shattered again. Bang! The fourth piece of black wood shattered as well. Bang! Crack! The fifth piece of black wood shattered as well, but it left a glaring crack on the demon god's armor. Bang! Crack, crack, crack! The sixth piece of black wood fell, and the crack on the demon god's armor instantly widened. Bang! Boom! The seventh piece of black wood fell, and the demon god's armor could no longer withstand it. It suddenly exploded, turning into a vast expanse of demon god chi that dissipated into the air. Bang! In the next moment, the 8th piece of black wood fell and heavily smashed onto Nye Tian's body. Chapter 2443. Nye Tian. The tragic scene made Chiwu Yunxiu cry out in shock, her beautiful eyes trembling incessantly. She suddenly sensed that Nye Tian's aura became extremely weak, as if it would disappear at any time. It's already very impressive that he can block this emperor's 7 slabs of blackwood. Yuli's figure stood in the air as he said coldly, "If the 8th slab of blackwood hits his martial body head-on, he will undoubtedly die." Hearing Yuli's words, Chiwu Yunxiu's beautiful eyes suddenly shrunk, tears gushed out of her eyes, and blood flowed out of the corner of her mouth. Really? But right at this moment, a voice sounded, appearing incomparably mocking. Boom! Within a lava cliff, an explosion sounded. A blood-colored figure walked out. It was Nye Tian. At this moment, Nye Tian's entire body was covered in blood, and his flesh was badly mangled. But he was still alive, and the sharpness and determination in his eyes did not change in the slightest. "Yuli, your 8 desolate blackwood is still not strong enough. It can't kill me." Nye Tian's body shook, and the blood on his body was cleansed, revealing a pale face. But there was not the slightest bit of fear in his eyes. Instead, it was blazing with fighting spirit. "This..." Yuli looked at Nye Tian, his eyes trembling incessantly. His expression was blank for a moment before he said, "How is this possible?" He completely did not expect that Nye Tian could actually survive after taking the 8 desolate blackwood head-on. And at this moment, not only did Nye Tian's aura not weaken, but became even stronger. In Yuli's view, this was something completely impossible. That attack, just now, even a peak deity state martial artist would also be heavily injured. But not only did Nietian not die, but his aura skyrocketed instead. This completely did not make sense. Kid, what exactly is inside your martial body? Yuli calmed down, his eyes trembling as he asked. There is something that you will never be able to obtain. Nie Tianling sneered. He took a step forward, and the fiend god energy in his body exploded. His aura was like that of a fiend god descending to the mortal world, crushing everything in its path. At this moment, Nie Tian did not know why, but he felt that he could completely control the power of 9,000 demons and gods. Moreover, he could feel that the god-fiend power was much more violent than before. Every strand of god-fiend power seemed to have been sublimated, and its might increased by several times. At this moment, a thin god-fiend barrier surged around Yetian. This god-fiend barrier looked thin, but it was actually extremely terrifying. This is impossible, absolutely impossible. Sensing Yetian's aura, Yuli's eyes trembled as he exclaimed, "How did your aura suddenly become stronger?" "Prepare to die," Nie Tianling sneered, his eyes filled with murderous intent. He didn't know why his aura suddenly became stronger. Immediately after, he took a step forward, and the fiend god armor once again appeared around his body. He directly punched out. Hum! In an instant, the giant shadow of a fist, like a mountain, smashed towards Yuli. Yuli's eyes widened as he reacted. With a flip of his palm, a desolate black wood appeared and blocked before him. Bang! Immediately, the desolate black wood, under the attack of the fiend god's fist, crumbled. Yuli's voice was sent flying. The corner of Nie Tian's lips twitched. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Before Yuli could stabilize himself, he threw another punch. Bang! Amidst the muffled sound, Yuli's silhouette once again flew out and smashed into the lava wall. After Nie Tian's capabilities increased, Yuli was unable to withstand a single attack and was completely abused by him. Get out! Immediately after, Nie Tian looked at the cave above the lava cliff and sneered. He stretched out his hand, and the shadow of a fiend god's palm appeared. An enormous suction force appeared and directly pulled Yuli out. Ancestor of the Yu clan, the Dark Emperor, I will tear you apart alive today. Nie Tian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. His cold voice resounded, and he directly punched out. Bang! 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 Amidst the muffled sounds, Yuli's silhouette swayed left and right. He was beaten so badly that he did not even look like a human. The dignified ancestor of the Yu clan, the high and mighty Dark Emperor of the Dark Prison, was actually beaten up like this. This was something that Yuli would never have dreamt of. The aura around Nie Tian's body surged crazily. His entire person was cold and murderous, extremely terrifying. When Shiwu Yunxiu saw this scene, she seemed to have realized something, and her eyes trembled uncontrollably. The thing that she was most worried about had finally happened. The seal in Nie Tian's body had gone out of control. The reason why Nie Tian's current strength could skyrocket was because of his sealed space-time. A huge amount of energy surged out and stimulated the potential of his divine demon powers. Under the sealed space-time, Nie Tian's strength would indeed skyrocket. However, his martial body would not be able to withstand such power. What should I do? Chiwu Yunxiu's beautiful eyes trembled, and she looked extremely nervous. Although she could control the seal in Nie Tian's body, she did not understand the seal at all. She also did not know what would happen next. Don't hit me anymore. At this moment, Yuli's trembling voice begged for mercy. Yes, I want to beat you until you beg for mercy. I like to hear your voice begging for mercy. Nie Tian's eyes were cold, and his expression was ruthless. He laughed maniacally. But I will not let you go. After he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his arm and gathered all the divine demon powers in his body and punched down. Bang! The moment the terrifying shadow of the fist landed, a muffled sound was heard. Yuli's body flew out like a sharp arrow and smashed into the lava cliff. Kaboom! With a loud bang, The entire abyss shook, and a huge cave with a diameter of 100 meters appeared on the cliff. Yuli's body was at the center of the cave. He was like a pile of mud. His flesh and blood were a mess. Nietion's punch almost destroyed the entire abyss. Not dead yet. Nietion's body froze, and his eyes locked onto Yuli. He could not help but sneer. He sensed that although Yuli's breath was very weak, it did not disappear and was very stable. Yuli's 1,000-wood divine body was indeed strong. After being tortured by Nietion for such a long time, he was still alive. Nietion. At this moment, Yuli's figure suddenly moved. He let out a low roar and directly stood up. Do you still have the ability to resist? Nietionling looked at Yuli coldly and said in a low voice, Nietion, you forced me to do this. Yuli's face was twisted and hideous as he spoke in a low voice. On his forehead, a blood-red vortex appeared and terrifying power surged within it. Nietion felt a strange aura and could not help but frown. It seemed that Yuli still had a powerful trump card that he had not used. If you want to kill me, then I will die with you. Yuli's expression was hideous and terrifying. The blood-red vortex on his forehead flew out and surged in the air. Then it began to expand. Suddenly, the air was filled with an extremely strong bloody aura. The bloody aura was suffocating. Nietion frowned and looked confused. QL 11-inch, oh no, this guy has forcefully broken the restriction in his body. At this moment, the fat cat screamed. His voice was filled with panic. At this moment, Yuli wanted to fight to the death. He forcefully broke the heaven-punishing restriction that the Emperor of the Underworld left in his body and restored his strength to the peak. He wanted to fight to the death with Nietion. If he forcefully broke the restriction, Yuli would definitely die. Chapter 2444. Break the forbidding formation? Nietion was startled when he heard Fat Cat's words. He had heard from Yuli that the latter's body had a heaven-punishing formation left by the Emperor of the Underworld, which prevented him from leaving the Dark Emperor Hall. He did not expect Yuli's final trump card to be to break the heaven-punishing formation forcefully. Bang, bang, bang. Just at this moment, the aura around Yuli's body suddenly soared. Waves of wild energy surged through the air, causing the space to tremble unceasingly. *T. Nietion frowned and exclaimed in his heart. He could sense that Yuli's aura had reached the peak of the transcendent state and was approaching the half-martial sacred realm. Yuli's strength was already at the half-martial sacred realm, but he was suppressed by the heaven-punishing formation, which was why his strength was only at the peak of the immortal state. Now that he had broken through the heaven-punishing formation forcefully, his strength was not affected by the forbidding formation, which was why he had reached the half-martial sacred realm. Mother, hide! Nietion immediately reacted and came to Chiwu Yunxio's side. He opened the 9 extremities and let her in. Nietion, you... Chiwu Yunxio could sense that the forbidding formation in Nietion's body was getting stronger. Her eyes flickered, and she wanted to say something. Mother, I'm fine. Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Nietion, who pushed her into the 9 extremities. Nietion had no idea that the forbidding formation in his body was slowly losing control. He thought it was Chiwu Yunxio's control that made his force of fiend god stronger. Nietion was relieved after letting Chiwu Yunxio enter the 9 extremities. Following this, he fixed his gaze on a cave on the cliff and reached out his hand, unleashing a strong suction force to pull the 7 city lords out of the cave. The 7 city lords were severely injured, but their auras were still present. Nietion did not say anything and let the 7 city lords into the 9 extremities. Having taken care of all of this, Nietion let out a long breath of turbid chi. Next, he could fight Yuli in peace. At this moment, Yuli had completely broken through the heaven-punishing prohibition. His aura skyrocketed to the extreme. Streams of black aura surged around him, making him look extremely strange. Stinking brat, you forced this emperor into a dead end. This emperor will never allow you to leave this place alive. Yuli let out a furious roar. His figure moved directly, and his palm slammed downwards. An 8 black would appear in the air and smash towards Nietian like a huge black sword. The mighty aura was incomparably vigorous, as if it had the power to destroy everything in its path. The fiend god power around Nietian's body surged violently, and the fiend god armor actually doubled in size in an instant. He punched out violently. Boom! 2 extremely violent forces collided in the air, causing the space to suddenly stagnate. A shockwave visible to the naked eye appeared like a violent ripple, bombarding in all directions. Boom! Crack, crack, crack! The terrifying shockwave fell, and the entire abyss shook violently. A huge crack appeared, and the abyss sank a few inches, as if it was about to collapse. Bang! In the next moment, the 8 black wood and the fiend god fish shadow almost exploded at the same time. Endless violent forces rushed out, wreaking havoc in the space. Boom! The cliff of the abyss was hit and exploded. In an instant, rocks flew everywhere, and turbid waves rose to the sky. The entire abyss could no longer withstand the terrifying violent forces and suddenly collapsed. Nietian's figure moved. His body trembled slightly, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Immediately, he saw a 1,000-meter large boulder falling down. His eyes trembled, and astral soul wings appeared on his back. His figure suddenly moved to the side, and then with a flap of his wings, he shot straight up into the sky. Yuli's figure also shot up into the sky at this moment. His body was surrounded by huge black wood, and the surrounding boulders collapsed. The 2 figures were extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, they rushed out of the abyss. Rumble! Under their feet, the entire abyss suddenly collapsed, forming a huge pit, and turbid waves thousands of meters high rushed up. Boy, your strength has amazed me. Yuli's figure froze in the air, and he looked at Nietian cold, and said in a cold voice, I'm tired of hearing this sentence. Nietianling responded with a smile. His face remained calm, but his eyes were filled with strong, killing intent. But in his heart, he was very surprised. He was very curious why he suddenly vomited blood just now. He clearly didn't suffer too much of an impact, and his body showed no signs of weakness. Instead, his strength was overflowing, and he almost exploded. He didn't understand why he vomited blood just now. What was going on? Nietian, do you feel anything? At this moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded, and she seemed to be a little nervous. Nietian frowned slightly. He used his divine sense to sense his body, and couldn't help but have a strange expression. He faintly felt that there was a huge and boundless power in the fiend god original embryo, and it was slowly awakening, like a ferocious beast that was waking up from a deep sleep. This power is so strong. Nietian became cold, and he couldn't help but say nervously. He could clearly feel that the fiend god ocean was becoming more and more violent, as if the endless ocean was about to explode into a tsunami. QL11, and at the bottom of the fiend god ocean, there seemed to be a huge monster that was slowly waking up. Nietian had never felt such majestic power before. Even the pseudo-sage expert that he encountered previously didn't have such a terrifying aura. What's going on? Nietian forced himself to calm down, but his lips were trembling, and he asked with a trembling voice. Fat Cat's expression was a little sluggish, and she said in a shocked tone, Nietian, the seal in your body seems to be completely opened. What do you mean? Nietian was stunned, and he asked in shock. Nietian, the seal in your body is very powerful. Once it is opened, your martial body won't be able to withstand it, and you'll be directly crushed by the power of the seal. Fat Cat didn't explain too much, and instead, she exclaimed in shock. This. Nietian's eyes trembled, and he couldn't help but gasp. At this moment, he suddenly understood something. No wonder his body was originally close to its limit. But after Chiwu Yunxiu activated the seal, his power skyrocketed, and it was even more terrifying than before. And now his power was still skyrocketing, and the dark aura around his body was getting stronger and stronger. He couldn't suppress it at all, and it was almost out of his control. It turned out that the seal in his body was about to be opened. He couldn't imagine how powerful the seal was and why it was so terrifying. That kind of power was completely unimaginable to him. Kid, are you afraid? Yuli saw the change in Nye Tian's expression, and he seemed to be very frightened, and he couldn't help but sneer and said arrogantly, "Unfortunately, it's too late." As soon as he said that, Yuli's figure moved instantly, and 8 Blackwood appeared around him. They whistled out, and like 8 giant beasts, they madly attacked Nye Tian. He forced his way through the seal, knowing that he would definitely die. Before he died, of course, he had to drag someone down with him. Moreover, in his heart, there was still a glimmer of hope. As long as he could kill Nye Tian and successfully merge with the latter's celestial demon embryo, there might be a chance that he could survive. "You're courting death." Nye Tian felt the enormous power rolling towards him, but he growled, and starlight heaven slash appeared in his hand. His entire body sword was released, and it perfectly merged with the celestial demon force, forming a boundless celestial demon sword will. Chapter 2445. Boom! Boom! The 8 Baron Blackwood shot up to the sky, and the fiend celestial sword shadow whizzed. The air within a radius of tens of thousands of meters trembled. The space was pulled taut, as if it was about to collapse. QL11 Yu Li in Nye Tian's strength was so terrifying that it could shake heaven and earth. Boom! The next moment, the 8 Baron Blackwood and the fiend celestial sword shadow collided with each other. An explosion was heard in the sky. Chi, chi, chi. In an instant, waves of wild power surged into space. It was extremely violent, and ear-piercing sounds were heard in the air. This was a battle between 2 forces. They consumed each other and devoured each other. The 2 forces were too terrifying. They couldn't destroy each other in an instant. They were in a stalemate. Boom! Crack! 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 Then the violent power spread to the ground, and the earth within a radius of tens of thousands of meters was instantly lifted up. Rocks cracked, grass and trees were all crushed, and the earth was torn apart, leaving terrifying cracks on the ground. This scene was really earth-shattering. It was like the end of the world. Yu Li and Nye Tian stood in the sky like 2 mountains. Their bodies were surging with terrifying wild power as they fought against each other crazily. The two's power was in a stalemate for more than 10 seconds. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore. Boom! After a loud explosion, the 8 Baron Blackwood shook violently. It could no longer withstand the violent pressure of the sword essence. Boom! 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 Immediately after, a deep and terrifying explosion sound came from high up in the sky. The 8 Baron Blackwood instantly collapsed and turned into chips flying in the air. The Blackwood chips danced in the air, and the surrounding space became much darker. The next moment, the fiend celestial sword shadow's power rose to the limit. It let out a piercing sword cry that shook the surroundings and the space. Oh no! Yuli felt an extremely sharp sword pressure in an instant. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he screamed in horror. He wanted to fight back, but it was too late. Boom! Bang! In the next moment, the sword shadows surged and pressed down. A muffled bang resounded, and Yu Li's figure flew backward, leaving behind a bloody trail in the air. On the other hand, Nye Tian's figure was as unmoving as a mountain. Furthermore, his aura was still rising rapidly. However, blood continued to flow from the corner of his mouth. The 9 scars on his body became even more obvious, as if his entire body was about to be torn apart. The power of this seal is so terrifying. Nye Tian felt excruciating pain all over his body. A crazy force was tearing him apart, almost tearing him into pieces. Oh no! Fat Cat could feel the power of the seal getting stronger and stronger. Her expression couldn't help but tremble, and her heart cried out in alarm. However, at this moment, Yuli stood up again. His entire body was dripping with fresh blood, and he had already become a bloody person. However, the aura around his body continued to rise explosively. This guy, he's not dead. Nye Tian's eyes darkened, and the corner of his mouth twitched. He diverted a lot of his energy to forcefully suppress the seal in his body, but it was useless. The terrifying seal was like a wild beast trapped in a cage. Now that it had found a chance to escape, how could it give up? Bang, bang, bang. At this moment, bloody wounds began to appear all over Nietion's body. Then, flaming chains appeared and danced around his body like wild snakes. Bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains. Nietion's expression suddenly changed, and he was extremely shocked. The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains in his body seemed to be unable to withstand the violent power of the seal, and directly came out. 9 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains coiled around Nietion's body, making him look extremely strange, like a 9-clawed octopus. "Kid, how can you be so strong?" Yuli spoke at this moment. His voice was extremely cold, and his entire body began to tear apart. Hua hua hua. Then, Yuli's body was forcefully torn apart, and many black trees grew out. His entire body was like a seed, growing crazily and instantly expanding. The black trees spread in the air, and they were extremely violent. This scene was very strange, but to Nietion, it was not strange. When he fought with Li Qi before, Li Qi's body had once grown into a huge black tree. Hua, hua, hua. At this moment, Yuli's body had turned into a huge black tree, which was at least 10,000 meters long. The huge branches were like black giant snakes, dancing in the void, and a terrifying aura was generated. The black tree that Yuli had formed was much stronger than Li Qi, and its aura was shocking, as if it could devour the sky. "Boy, even if I die, I will take you down with me." Yuli let out a furious roar. The huge blackwood body suddenly moved. Countless huge branches came crashing down like a huge dark cloud, covering the sky and the sun, rolling and whistling. Boom! In the sky, countless black trees were like hemp ropes, twisting together to form a terrifying black tree hand, pressing down with a loud bang. Buzz! The void suddenly tightened, and the spiraling space was forcefully torn apart, emitting a terrifying squeezing sound. At this moment, Nietion felt a terrifying pressure, and his eyes trembled. Boom, boom, boom. But then, the power of the divine and demon in his body suddenly skyrocketed. The power of the divine and demon was like a raging wave, stirring up a terrifying aura. "You want to die with me? You are not worthy." In an instant, Nietion's eyes turned cold, and the corner of his mouth twitched. The 9-bone, eroding soul, shackling chains around his body actually danced wildly, entangling with each other violently. Nietion was stunned. He actually felt that the bone-eroding soul, shackling chains were under his control. Under the impact of the power of the divine and demon, the bone-eroding soul, shackling chains strangely merged with Nietion. It was no longer a curse in his body, but had become his vassal, his weapon. Break! In the next moment, Nietion unleashed all of his fiend god power. His armor of fiend god went berserk as he reached out with one hand, and 9-bone, eroding soul, shackling chains shot out at the same time. Like 9 giant snakes, they swooped down with incomparable ferocity. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The 9-bone, eroding soul, shackling chains were like sharp arrows, whistling through the air, and directly pierced through the black tree hand in the air. His black tree body was broken, and Yuli howled in pain. He immediately felt the aura of death approaching, and his eyes revealed unconcealable horror. This time, he really had no way to turn the situation around. At this time, the 9-bone, eroding soul, shackling chains actually merged together, and like a ferocious beast, they pierced through Yuli's black tree body. No! Yuli felt death approaching, and he raised his black tree arm and shouted with difficulty. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Die! A hint of a cold smile appeared at the corner of Nietion's mouth as he let out a bellow and jerked his arm. With a loud crashing sound, the 10,000-meter-long black tree was ripped in two by the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chain. Chapter 2446. The blackwood rain in the sky took a long time to dissipate completely. The air was filled with a dark and bloody aura, making people feel suffocated. Yet Tion stood in the air, his gaze still cold. He won the final battle of life and death. Yu Li, Yu Clan's old ancestor, Dark Prison Emperor, an expert of his generation, died in his hands. However, Tion was not calm at all. His aura continued to rise. The terrifying power of the gods and demons was like waves of dark air, shooting up to the sky, causing the earth to tremble. Tion killed Yu Li in one move, proving the power of the seal. At this moment, his martial body could not take it anymore. Bloody wounds appeared all over his body. His body was riddled with holes, and his flesh was badly mangled. Fat. The seal can't suppress it any longer. Tion sensed that extremely dark power was rising from the depths of the sea of gods and devils. His body couldn't bear such a terrifying power at all. The sea of gods and demons was like a barrier, preventing the seal from completely bursting. But the sea of gods and demons was boiling. The barrier was about to collapse. Once the seal broke through the barrier, it would be the time for Tion to die. What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? What should I do? Fat Cat jumped around. His body was drenched in cold sweat. He was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. He was above the sea of gods and demons. Of course, he could feel the terrifying power of the seal. If the sealing power was completely unleashed, not only would Tion not survive, but the little Fat Cat would also die. Boom, boom, boom. In the mythical demon ocean, the power of the mythical demon was surging, and the power of the seal was about to rush out of the sea. The wounds on Tion's body were even more terrifying. He felt that every bone in his body was about to be torn apart. If not for his strong martial body, he would have been a corpse under such circumstances. Tion, hang in there, you must hang in there. Fat Cat muttered. His face was covered in cold sweat. Bang! Just at this time, a majestic force appeared, rushing up from the sea of gods and demons. It was like a flood dragon breaking out of the abyss, rushing out with a bang. Boom! The entire sea of gods and demons shook violently. Endless waves of gods and demons surged in all directions. The entire sea swayed as if it was about to collapse. Pooh! Puff! Puffed! Tion sensed it. His body shook, and he spat out 3 mouthfuls of blood. His face was as pale as paper, and his eyes became dispirited, losing their luster little by little. Tion, pull yourself together. You must stay awake. The Fat Cat's figure appeared, shouting and yelling. Once again, it released the glazed chi to attack Tion's divine sense, keeping him awake. The sea of gods and demons was the final barrier of the seal. If Tion fell unconscious, it would be completely over. Tion suddenly became clear-headed. He opened his eyes and blood flowed out of his pupils. He felt that all the bones and meridians in his body were broken, and he was about to lose consciousness. Fat, I will hold on. Tion used all the strength in his body to speak with difficulty. His whole body was surging with a pungent dark aura. But this was a powerful seal that was about to go out of control. No matter how strong Tion's willpower was, he could not withstand the impact of the seal. At this time, the Fat Cat's eyes suddenly trembled, as if he had thought of something. He suddenly let out a strange cry and said, I know. At the last moment, he finally thought of how to suppress the seal. I will make a sealing gate for this seal. The Fat Cat let out a strange cry. He was very excited. Seal gate. Tion's divine sense slowly weakened. His body swayed as if he was about to fall. He said in a daze, Tion, this is your last chance. You must hold on. The Fat Cat said in a deep voice. Once again, he released the azure chi from his body and continuously attacked Tion, trying to keep him awake. Previously, the Fat Cat had used too much azure chi to transfer the cursed shackles. At this time, he did not have much azure chi left. Then, the Fat Cat took out the 9 extremities from Tion's body and let Chiwu Yunxiu and Junao Qing out. This time, Whether Nyetian could survive this life-or-death situation depended on Chiwu Yunxiu and Jun Aoqing. Nyetian. Chiwu Yunxiu came out of the nine extremities and could not help but scream when she saw Nyetian's bloody appearance. Nyetian, what happened to you? Jun Aoqing was also shocked by the scene in front of her. She had never seen Nyetian injured so badly. Nyetian's divine sense was already blurred. He could only vaguely see two familiar faces in front of him. He wanted to say something, but no sound came out. You too. Nyetian is now in a life-or-death situation. I don't have time to explain too much to you. Whether Nyetian can survive or not depends on you. The fat cat did not beat around the bush and said directly, QL 11-inch Master Chinchilla, what do you want us to do? Chiwu Yunxiu was after all a person who had been through a lot. She immediately calmed down and said in a deep voice. The fat cat nodded and said, the seal in Nyetian's body is going out of control. The only way now is to suppress the seal. I want to make a gate of sealing for this powerful seal. Chiwu Yunxiu was stunned for a moment and said, Master Chinchilla, this seal is very powerful. I'm afraid I know how powerful the seal is. The fat cat did not have time. It directly interrupted Chiwu Yunxiu and said, I want to use the source of darkness to make the gate of sealing. How could the fat cat not know that Chiwu Yunxiu was worried about not having a suitable material to make the gate of sealing? After all, the seal was too powerful. What kind of power was needed to make the gate of sealing? Source of darkness? Chiwu Yunxiu was stunned when she heard the fat cat's words. She suddenly exclaimed, the dark abyss. Yes. The little fat cat nodded heavily and said, that's exactly what I want Nyetian to do. I want him to merge the three forms of darkness into a complete version of the dark abyss, and then turn it into a sealing gate. This. Chiwu Yunxiu was stunned when she heard the fat cat's words. Nyetian was only a mid-stage paramount god. Could his martial body really withstand the complete source of darkness? Moreover, Nyetian only had the heart of darkness in his body. Where could he find the soul of darkness and the hand of darkness? Of course, Chiwu Yunxiu didn't know that the soul of darkness and the hand of darkness were already in Nyetian's hands. There's no time to think too much. We have to start now. The fat cat didn't say much. Yes, Chiwu Yunxiu and Jun Aoqing nodded at the same time. No matter what, they had to give it a try. By now, Nyetian had already fainted. His body was covered in blood, and the wounds all over his body were expanding. It was almost impossible to maintain his body in one piece. The fat cat raised its fat paw and sent Nyetian's body high up in the sky, where it lay quietly. Then it released waves of glazed qi, and in the blink of an eye, a grand formation was formed. Blood flowed out of the corner of the fat cat's mouth. It didn't have enough glazed qi, so it had to use blood qi. After the grand spell formation was set up, two very obvious spell formation eyes appeared, and Nyetian was standing on one of them. The other was prepared for Chiwu Yunxiu. Chiwu Yunxiu's figure moved, directly landing on another formation eye. Chapter 2447. The Dark Origin Energy, the Dark Abyss, was divided into three parts: Soul of Darkness, Heart of Darkness, and Hand of Darkness. These three parts were known as the three bodies of darkness. QL11, only a martial artist with a powerful dark bloodline, could fuse with the Dark Origin Energy. The Extreme Demon Fetus was a powerful dark bloodline, but even a martial artist with the Extreme Demon Fetus could only fuse with one of the three bodies of darkness. If two of the three bodies of darkness were fused, there would be a repulsion, and the martial artist would be destroyed by this repulsion. However, if the three bodies of darkness were gathered and fused at the same time, a balance could be achieved, and the three bodies could coexist, and the complete dark abyss could be formed. Fat Cat's plan was to let Nyetian fuse the three bodies of darkness at the same time and condense the dark abyss in his body, then use the dark abyss as a sealing door to suppress the seal. Perhaps the dark abyss was slightly weaker than the seal in Nyetian's body, but it was more than enough to be used as a sealing door. The only problem now was whether Nyetian could persevere and whether Nyetian's martial body could withstand the complete dark abyss. Master Chinchilla, can we start? Chiwu Yunshio stood on one of the formation's eyes and could not wait any longer. Let's start. Fat Cat nodded, and with a thought, activated the formation. Waves of formation energy gathered and instantly formed a bond between Yetian and Chiwu Yunshio, connecting the two of them together. Fat Cat did this to connect Nyetian and Chiwu Yunshio together, so that Chiwu Yunshio could share the pressure of Nyetian's martial body. Chiwu Yunshio and Nyetian were mother and son, and when they were connected, there would be a strong resonance between the two of them, which was enough to temporarily suppress the violent seal in Nyetian's body. Boom! In an instant, Chiwu Yunshio felt a terrifying force surging within her, causing her body to tremble. She was a peak paramount god with battle prowess that was close to the peak god level. However, enduring this kind of impact made her feel strenuous. It was hard for her to imagine how Nyetian had managed to hold on until now. Very good. The Fat Cat checked and confirmed that the bloodline resonance between Nyetian and Chiwu Yunshio was very stable. The Fat Cat could not help but smile. In this way, he had bought a lot of time for Nyetian. Lord Chinchilla, what should I do? Jun Ouching stepped forward and asked. Little girl, you are very important. Whether Nyetian can successfully fuse Dark Soul and Dark Hand depends on you. Fat Cat nodded slightly and looked at Jun Ouching with a solemn expression. Of course, he did not ask Jun Ouching to come out to watch the show. Jun Ouching played a very important role in the process of Nyetian's fusion of Dark Soul and Dark Hand. Little girl, you know that the space here is very special. The Fat Cat nodded and continued. I want you to change the structure of the space so that all the space-time momentum converges toward Nyetian. Do you understand? Yes. Jun Ouching nodded with a firm expression. She was a space-time swordsman, so of course she understood the structure of space-time. She also knew what the Fat Cat wanted to do. Then, Jun Ouching's body shook, and she released the space-time sword will crazily from her body, spreading out nearly 10,000 meters of the space. Her forehead was covered in sweat, and it was obvious that she had reached her limit. 10,000 meters of space is enough. The Fat Cat nodded and said, Let's begin. Yes. Jun Ouching nodded again, and then with a move of her mind, the sword will in the void began to surge, forcibly changing the spiral space. The space-time was forcibly changed, and there was a strange roar. At this moment, there was a shocking change in the space-time momentum. The spiral momentum in the space-time was forcibly changed, and waves of space-time power tilted toward Nyetian, like a space-time tunnel, opening the door to him. Little girl, you've done very well. Hold on, don't let the surrounding space-time shake even a little, the Fat Cat said with a faint smile as she sensed the change in space-time. Jun Ouching nodded with an unusually firm look in her eyes. She would hold on and stabilize the space within 10,000 meters of the surrounding space. At this moment, the Fat Cat raised its hands, and Dark Soul and Dark Hand flew up, instantly turning into two huge dark vortexes, condensing in the air. Boom! Boom! The next moment, Dark Soul and Dark Hand trembled almost at the same time, and then they began to release a dark aura, which actually followed the space-time momentum and spread toward where Nyetian was. At this moment, the use of Jun Ouching to change the structure of space-time was revealed. The Fat Cat was using the space-time momentum to help Nyetian integrate the two dark source energies faster. The next moment, with the help of the space-time momentum, Nyetian began to crazily absorb the Dark Soul and Heart of Darkness. At the same time, in his body, two waves of dark energy surged in, like two wild beasts, directly rushing toward the origin embryo space. Nyetian had already integrated the Heart of Darkness, so it was relatively easier for him to integrate the dark source energies again. Waves of dark energy integrated into his demonic aura, causing the dark aura all over his body to become more and more intense. At the same time, Chiwu Yunshio was also suffering the same impact, and dense beads of sweat appeared on her face. Very good. The Fat Cat sensed that everything was going smoothly, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Next, They just had to wait for Nyetian to completely integrate the dark soul and dark hand. Then the dark abyss could appear. Time passed, minute by minute. About half an hour later, the two dark vortexes in the sky had become very small, and they were about to disappear at any time. At this moment, June Ouching's body was already dripping with sweat, and there were even traces of blood at the corner of her mouth. She had forcibly maintained her peak state for half an hour, which was a huge burden for her. But she could bear all the burden for Nye Tian. Chi Wu Yinxio's body was also trembling slightly, and her martial body was approaching its limit. She was the extreme demon fetus, so her martial body was very strong, but her condition was too poor, and she had not recovered to her peak state. A moment later, the two dark vortexes in the sky finally disappeared. At the same time, the demonic aura in Nye Tian's body merged with the heart of darkness, dark soul, dark hand, and dark body at the same time. Boom! In an instant, the three forces of darkness collided with each other, forming a terrifying and boundless force. Nye Tian's body suddenly shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, and the wounds on his body were torn open. Nye Tian. Chi Wu Yinxio couldn't help but scream when she saw this. June Ouching's face stiffened in fear, and tears were already flowing down her cheeks. Huh? What's going on? Fat Cat couldn't help but scream when she saw this. It seemed that after the three bodies of the Dark Ocean had gathered, they did not form the Dark Abyss as he had expected, but were colliding and repelling each other. Boom! 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 In Nye Tian's body, the three bodies of the Dark Ocean kept colliding with each other, and waves of violent energy surged, causing his body that was already on the verge of collapse to fall into an even more dangerous situation. If this situation continued, Nye Tian's body would not be able to withstand it and would definitely explode. Oh no! This is the initial repelling between the three bodies of the Dark Ocean. Nye Tian will not be able to withstand it. Fat Cat instantly understood and screamed. It was not that the three bodies of the Dark Ocean did not fuse, but that they repelled each other and then fused together to form the Dark Abyss. Chapter 2448. What should I do? Fat Cat's eyes were trembling as he panicked. The strong rejection between the three dark bodies was something he had not expected. Master Chinchilla, what happened? Chi Wu Yunxiu could not help but ask when he saw Nye Tian's condition suddenly deteriorating and little Fat Cat's panicked expression. The three dark bodies are rejecting each other. Fat Cat said in a deep voice with an ugly expression. Chi Wu Yunxiu was taken aback and his eyes trembled. She knew about the origin energy and knew that the rejection between the origin energy was very strong. Nye Tian could not withstand the impact at his current condition. Lord Chinchilla, do you have a way for me to bear the impact? Chi Wu Yunxiu was extremely calm. Her beautiful eyes flickered as she asked with a deep voice. Fat Cat was stunned for a moment before he looked at Chi Wu Yunxiu and locked his gaze on the bond between Nye Tian and Chi Wu Yunxiu. Under normal circumstances, the bond between two cultivators would bear the impact together. It was very difficult for one person to bear all the impact alone. However, Chi Wu Yunxiu and Nye Tian were different. They were mother and son, and their bloodline resonated strongly with each other. Therefore, their bond was different from ordinary people. If Fat Cat was willing, he could let Chi Wu Yunxiu bear the impact of the origin energy in place of Nye Tian through the bond. However, the problem was that Chi Wu Yunxiu's current condition was also very bad. Could she bear the impact of the origin energy? Thinking about this, little Fat Cat hesitated. Master Chinchilla, there's no time. Just do it. Chi Wu Yunxiu shouted when she saw Fat Cat's silence. She knew that Fat Cat could do it. At that moment, every second Fat Cat hesitated, Nye Tian would be in greater danger. Chi Wu Yunxiu could not bear to watch her son die in front of her. Nye Tian, I don't have a choice. Please don't blame me. I hope your mother can get through this. Fat Cat's gaze trembled slightly. Her gaze shifted between Chi Wu Yunxiu and Nye Tian, and she finally made a decision. Chi Wu Yunxiu was in a bad condition, but she was much better than Nye Tian. Fat Cat could only take a gamble and let Chi Wu Yunxiu bear all the impact. After making her decision, the fat cat's mind moved, and the formation's operation changed. It tilted slightly towards Chiwu Yunxiu. Immediately, the bond between Nie Tian and Chiwu Yunxiu changed. Most of the bond was concentrated on Chiwu Yunxiu. In this way, Nie Tian only had to bear a small amount of pressure. QL 11-inch. At this moment, Chiwu Yunxiu's body was impacted. Her body trembled, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. However, she quickly stabilized her body, endured the pain, and did not make a sound. Seeing this, Fat Cat prayed in her heart that nothing bad would happen. After a while, Nie Tian's body began to stabilize. The three dark bodies' rejection phase was successfully passed. Next, in Nie Tian's body, the three dark bodies began to slowly merge. Waves of dark energy surged around his body, making him look like a huge dark vortex. Fat Cat could feel that in Nie Tian's body, an extremely dark energy was slowly forming. Dark abyss. Fat Cat could not hide the excitement in her heart and exclaimed excitedly. At this moment, in Nie Tian's body, a vast and boundless dark energy appeared. It was like a curtain that covered the sky, and it filled Nie Tian's body with terrifying darkness. This dark energy was the complete darkness origin energy, the dark abyss facet. At this moment, under the impact of the dark abyss, Chiwu Yunxiu's body swayed slightly. Like a leaf in the wind, she was about to wither at the next moment. Chiwu Yunxiu, you must hang in there. Fat Cat looked at Chiwu Yunxiu, and then her body moved, and she entered the space of the origin fetus. Chiwu Yunxiu's body was drenched in sweat, and it was obvious that she was enduring the huge impact. The complete source of darkness was an extremely powerful force. Even at her peak condition, Chiwu Yunxiu found it difficult to withstand this force. Moreover, she was already a withered leaf in the wind. However, she gritted her teeth and persevered, not letting herself fall into a coma. She knew that if she collapsed, the huge impact would be added to Nie Tian's body. Therefore, no matter what, she had to hang in there. Fat Cat entered the space of the origin fetus and looked at the dark abyss above his head. Only then did he truly feel how powerful this force was. The kind of aura that covered the sky, engulfed everything, made one tremble in fear, make one crawl, and make one despair. I must quickly merge the dark abyss and the ocean of gods and demons together to form the gate of sealing. Fat Cat calmed down and said in a low voice. Then his body moved, and waves of colored glaze chi were released, and it slowly spread towards the dark abyss. Moments later, under the guidance of the colored glazed chi, the dark abyss descended like a curtain from the sky and slowly approached the ocean of gods and demons. At this moment, the impact of the dark abyss was even greater. Blood flowed from the corner of Fat Cat's mouth, and his body trembled slightly. But he was very calm, and there was not a trace of panic. About half an hour later, the dark abyss fell into the ocean of gods and demons and slowly merged with the power of the gods and demons, forming a huge gate of sealing. The power of the seal under the ocean of gods and demons began to calm down. It was like a wild beast, after struggling for a long time, was finally tired and fell into a deep sleep. In Nie Tian's body, the seal was like a giant beast, and the ocean of gods and demons was the cage that trapped the giant beast, and the dark abyss was the gate, the second barrier that trapped the giant beast. As the dark abyss covered the entire ocean of gods and demons, the violent seal completely calmed down and once again fell into a deep sleep. Phew! Fat Cat looked at the ocean of gods and demons that had calmed down, and his tense face finally calmed down, and he let out a long breath. But the next moment, he suddenly thought of something and exclaimed, Chiwu Yunxiu. The seal in Nie Tian's body was finally settled, but he did not know how Chiwu Yunxiu was doing. Fat Cat's figure appeared, but he saw that Chiwu Yunxiu was covered in blood, and the aura in her body was weak and faint, as though it was about to disappear. After withstanding the repulsive force of the three dark bodies and the impact of the dark abyss, Chiwu Yunxiu finally could not hold on any longer. June ouching hugged Chiwu Yunxiu, and tears flowed down her cheeks. At this moment, Nietian woke up, and he stood up with difficulty and spoke with a trembling voice. Mother! Chiwu Yunxiu's eyes were tightly shut, and she was completely unconscious. The last bit of aura in her body was about to disappear. Mother! With these words, Nietian took a step forward and infused Qi Huangxiu with the power of the Earthstring source. However, to his surprise, Qi Huangxiu was no longer able to absorb the power he was infusing into him. Chiwu Yunxiu was too weak, and her life was in danger. This little fat cat was stunned for a moment, and its face was extremely embarrassed. He had expected that if Chiwu Yunxiu was the only one who suffered the impact, she would most likely die. But when it really happened, he could not accept it. Most importantly, how was Nietian going to endure it? With Chiwu Yunxiu's current state, there was no way she could survive. Kid. At this moment, a weak voice suddenly sounded. Nietian and the little fat cat raised their heads at the same time and looked to the other side. What they saw was an unexpected figure. Yu Li. The Dark Emperor Yu Li was not dead. Chapter 2449. Nietian's eyes widened when he saw Yu Li's silhouette. He never would have thought that Yu Li was actually not dead yet and was still alive. His body of black would have been directly torn apart by Nietian. Even in such a situation, this guy was still alive. His vitality was simply abnormal. However, Yu Li's aura was extremely weak. It was obvious that he was on his last breath. Almost at the same time, Nietian came to the same conclusion, and his eyes shone with intense light. He has the wood spirit heart, the origin of wood power. The battle of life and death was too intense and dangerous. He forgot about this. Yu Li was dead. The spiritual heart of wood should not have been destroyed. It should have appeared. The spiritual heart of wood did not appear because Yu Li was still alive. Don't come over. Yu Li obviously knew what Nietian and the little fat cat were thinking. He opened his mouth with difficulty, and a cold smile appeared on his face. If you dare to come close, I will destroy the spirit heart of all wood. Nietian and Fat Cat's eyes trembled at the same time. Although they were doubtful whether Yu Li had the ability to destroy the spiritual heart of wood, they did not dare to take the risk. The spiritual heart of wood was Chiwu Yunxiu's last hope. Kid, if you want the spiritual heart of wood, you must promise me 3 things. Yu Li said in a deep voice. His eyes that were losing their light released a strange light. What is it? Nietian asked anxiously. Every second now was related to Chiwu Yunxiu's life. Of course he was anxious. First, you must help me find the complete spiritual heart of wood and give it to the Yu clan. Yu Li seemed to have used up all his strength and said in a deep voice. Okay. Nietian agreed without hesitation. Don't be in such a hurry. I haven't finished. Yu Li's breath was weak and intermittent. A token appeared in his hand, and he said, the second thing is, take this token and give it to the current head of the Yu family. Let him open the ancestral ground of the Yu family. No problem. Nietian was burning with anxiety as he nodded heavily. The third thing, this emperor wants you to swear that you will definitely kill the emperor of the underworld. Yu Li actually seemed to have regained the last bit, roaring out in a fierce voice. However, before Nietian could respond, his body suddenly stiffened, and the last glimmer of life in his eyes disappeared. Nietian's figure moved, arriving directly beside Yu Li. He stretched out his palm and took the command token from Yu Li's hand. The latter's body actually crumbled and turned into a ball of black wood that dissipated. In the void, a green vortex floated. It was the wood elemental source energy, the 10,000 wood spirit heart. Nietian took the 10,000 wood spiritual heart directly. His figure returned and handed the 10,000 wood spiritual heart to Fat Cat. I hope the all-wood spirit heart can stabilize your mother's aura. The Fat Cat took the all-wood spirit heart, its paws trembling slightly. If the all-wood spirit heart could not stabilize Chiwu Yunxiu's aura, the latter would die without a doubt. Then, without hesitation, the Fat Cat channeled a stream of glazed chi into the all-wood spirit heart. Instantly, The green vortex expanded, and like a surging green liquid, it enveloped Chiwu Yunxiu. Immediately, a strong life force was released and seeped into Chiwu Yunxiu's body. Chiwu Yunxiu's weak aura instantly stabilized. The all-wood spirit heart is working. The fat cat could feel that Chiwu Yunxiu's aura had stabilized, and could not help but exclaim in surprise. The cat's tensed face instantly relaxed. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and the huge rock that was hanging over his heart was finally released. Among the 9 great origins, 3 types of origins had the strongest life force. They were the wood origin, the water origin, and the earth origin. Among the 3 types of origins, the wood origin's life force was the easiest to be absorbed by martial artists. In Chiwu Yunxiu's current state, perhaps only the all-wood spirit heart could stabilize her aura. Next, the fat cat observed Chiwu Yunxiu's condition. Although the latter's aura had stabilized, there was no sign of her waking up. "Fat, why hasn't my mother woken up yet?" Nie Tian frowned and asked worriedly. The fat cat frowned and said with an ugly expression, "Nie Tian, the all-wood spirit heart can only help your mother to stabilize her aura, but can't wake her up." As it spoke, the fat cat's expression became even uglier, and it continued, "Moreover, the wood origin's power can't be maintained for long. If we want your mother to wake up, we must find a complete all-wood spirit heart." The all-wood spirit heart in Yuli's body was only a small part of the wood origin. That was why he asked Nie Tian to find all the all-wood spirit hearts and give them to the Yu family. This part of the all-wood spirit heart could only keep Chiwu Yunxiu in her current state, but it couldn't wake her up. Moreover, the all-wood spirit heart's power was limited, and it couldn't be maintained for long. Hearing the fat cat's words, Nie Tian frowned, and his expression that had just eased up turned ugly again. "Nie Tian, there's only one way now." Then, the fat cat suddenly thought of something and said in a deep voice, "What is it?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he asked, "The all-wood spirit heart's power can't be maintained for long, so we can only seal your mother in ice." The fat cat's eyes were bright, and it said heavily, "QL 11-inch ice seal." Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he immediately understood what the fat cat meant. At the same time, he thought of a person, Emo. The all-wood spirit heart could only keep Chiwu Yunxiu alive, but this state couldn't be maintained for long, so it could only seal her in ice and keep Chiwu Yunxiu in this state. As for the method to seal her in ice, it was ready-made. Previously, Nie Tian had saved a member of the Wings of Frost clan, Emo. At this time, Emo was in the 9 extremities in hibernation, waiting to absorb the cold energy and grow the second pair of Wings of Frost. Moreover, if Emo couldn't absorb enough cold energy to grow the second pair of wings within 3 months, he would die in the Frost Demon cocoon. At this time, Nie Tian could use the power of the Wings of Frost to seal Chiwu Yunxiu in ice. Then, Nie Tian and the fat cat didn't hesitate and directly brought Chiwu Yunxiu into the 9 extremities. The current 9 extremities was even colder than before, and it was already a world of ice and snow. Without hesitation, Nie Tian directly used a part of the cold energy of the Wings of Frost to form an ice house, and sealed Chiwu Yunxiu in ice. The Frost Chi was extremely cold and and it was compatible with the attribute of Chiwu Yunxiu's extreme demon fetus. She was sealed in ice, but not only was she unharmed, it also helped to stabilize her aura. "Mother, don't worry, I will definitely find the all-wood spirit heart and wake you up." Looking at the frozen Chiwu Yunxiu, Nie Tian's eyes were slightly wet, and his heart was heavy. Although he was unconscious when he merged the 3 dark bodies just now, he knew everything that happened. The reason why Chiwu Yunxiu became like this was because she had borne too much of the impact on his behalf. Nie Tian swore that no matter what price he had to pay, he would definitely wake Chiwu Yunxiu up. "Nie Tian, what do you feel now?" The matter of Chiwu Yunxiu was finally settled, and the fat cat immediately looked at Nie Tian and asked, unable to conceal the worry in her eyes. Nie Tian had merged the 3 dark bodies, and his body possessed the complete dark abyss, the source of darkness, and the dark abyss had also merged with the sea of gods and demons. Even the fat cat couldn't predict what kind of impact this would have on Nietion's martial body. Nietion let out a long breath and began to check his condition. Chapter 2450. What's wrong, Nietion? Fat Cat asked, frowning at Nietion's sudden reaction. Nietion frowned, a look of confusion on his face. After a long moment passed, he said, "The devil god power inside of me seems to have decreased." When he tried to circulate his god fiend nascent embryo and release the power of the god fiend, he discovered that he could only release one strand of god fiend power. Previously, he had awakened 1,000 streams of devil god power, so why was there only 100 left? It was as if his devil god power had once again been sealed. Oh, so that's what happened. That's normal. Fat Cat chuckled. The sea of devil gods inside of you has fused with the dark abyssal plane and created a sealing portal. That means the sea of devil gods has been reopened, and the power of 9,000 devil gods is now dormant. The awakened power of the fiend god in your body was only awakened because you fused with the dark abyssal realm and increased your strength. Nietion's jaw dropped as he examined his own aura. Sure enough, he was now a late paramount god. Of course, that didn't make him feel very happy. It was only a matter of time before he broke through. Even without the dark abyssal plane, he would have broken through to the late paramount god level sooner or later. However, the fact that the 1,000 streams of devil god power were now dormant left Nietion feeling very depressed. How could he possibly accept the fact that 9,000 streams of devil god power had been awakened so painstakingly? QL11, how long would it take for him to fully awaken the power of 9,000 devil gods? Most importantly, without that power, he wouldn't be able to form the devil god sword will. Even if he got stronger, his battle prowess would drop. The devil god sword will was one of his most important trump cards. Are you worried about the devil god sword will, Nietion? Fat Cat asked, smiling faintly. She could tell what was on Nietion's mind. Yeah, Nietion said, frowning. Don't worry. However, the Fat Cat smiled and said, your god fiend power has been stimulated by the seal in your body and has undergone some kind of qualitative change. Although you've only awakened one strand of demon god power, it's not much weaker than the 1,000 strands of demon god power from before. In fact, when it condenses into sword intent, the sword intent condensed from this strand of god fiend power will be even purer, sharper, and more powerful. Really, Nietion was stunned and didn't quite believe it. What kind of qualitative change had happened to the power of the fiend gods? It could actually make a single strand of the power of the fiend gods stronger than 1,000 strands of the fiend gods from before. If you don't believe me, you can feel it, Fat Cat said with a chuckle. Nietion nodded slightly. He then tried to release the only strand of god fiend power he had and fused it with his sword will. At this moment, his expression changed. He really felt that this strand of god fiend sword was even more terrifying than before. It seemed to contain power that surpassed the limit. He was stunned for a few seconds before he finally reacted and said in a daze, how did the power of the fiend gods suddenly become so powerful? In fact, previously, he had already felt that the power of the fiend gods was different according to the degree of violence of the seal in his body. It seemed that the seal under the fiend gods' ocean determined the power of the fiend gods. Well, I don't know either. The Fat Cat laughed dryly and said, anyway, your martial body is now more powerful than before. Moreover, the dark abyss and the power of the seal have formed a perfect balance. As long as you don't forcibly use the power of the dark abyss, the seal will not be in danger. Nietion took a deep breath and nodded subconsciously. After a while, he calmed down and couldn't help but ask, Fat, what kind of seal is in my body? Why is it so terrifying that it can actually increase the power of the fiend gods by 1,000 times? I don't know. The Fat Cat shook its head again and said with a bitter smile, perhaps I will only be able to answer your question when I grow my 8th tail. Nietion laughed and couldn't help but glance at the Fat Cat. The latter still only had 7 tails. The 9-tailed chinchilla could only awaken the inherited memories of the chinchilla when it grew 9 tails. The current Fat Cat hadn't fully grown yet. Tian was very shocked. He knew that the seal in his body must be very powerful. He originally wanted to ask Qiwi Yunxiu about the seal, but before he could, the latter was frozen. It seems that I can only ask my mother when she wakes up. Tian sighed and said in his heart. Then, Tian continued to sense his body and made a strange discovery. He asked in shock, Fat, what's with the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains? The 9 bone-eroding soul-shackling chains had turned into runes and were engraved on Tian's 9 dragon veins. It was extremely strange. It seemed that the cursed shackling chains had become one with the 9 dragon veins. This was something that Tian didn't expect. It was no wonder that the 9 scars on his body had completely disappeared. I'm also very curious about this. The fat cat said with a puzzled look, logically speaking, even if you have merged with the dark abyss, you shouldn't be able to remove the damage from the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains. I was still worried about how I could help you remove the cursed shackling chains. I didn't expect the cursed shackling chains to become one with the 9 dragon veins and completely become a part of your body. I guess this has something to do with the tear of the princess in your body. Tian frowned. After thinking for a long time, he nodded. The cursed shackling chains were left in Yu Li's body by the emperor of the underworld, so it should be something from the ancient Ming race. The tear of the princess might be the reason why the cursed shackling chains could be used by Tian. No matter what, the cursed shackling chains have been refined by you and become a part of you. It's like you have an extra spirit. Then, the fat cat smiled proudly and said, also, after checking, the cursed shackling chains have perfectly merged with the 9 dragon veins. Your sovereign dragon vein has become even stronger than before. Yes, that is indeed the case. Tian nodded happily. He could clearly feel that the supreme dragon vein's aura was much stronger than before. Not only did the bone-eroding soul-shackling chains not hurt him, but they had also merged with him. This was really a blessing in disguise. Next, Tian thoroughly checked his body. Apart from his slightly weaker aura, he didn't find any other abnormalities. He finally relaxed. This trip to the Dark Abyss prison was more dangerous than he had expected. But overall, the outcome was still good. Although Qiwi Yunxiu was sealed in ice, Tian was confident that he could wake her up. Tian, are you really going to do those 3 things for the Dark Emperor? At this time, the fat cat suddenly asked. Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. After thinking for a long time, he first nodded, then shook his head. Before Yuli died, he threatened Tian with the spiritual heart of all trees to do 3 things for him. Chapter 2451. Yuli had mentioned 3 things. The first was to find a complete spiritual heart of all wood and hand it over to the Yu family. Tian wanted to save his mother, so he would naturally search for the spiritual heart of all wood. After he awakened Qiwi Yunxiu with the spiritual heart of all wood, he would hand it over to the Yu family. The second was to deliver a token to the Yu family's patriarch on behalf of Yuli. This was a simple matter. Tian would do as he was told. However, the third was that Yuli wanted Tian to kill the Netherworld Emperor. Before Tian could answer the last question, Yuli died. Therefore, Tian could pretend that it didn't exist or refuse Yuli's request. However, that wasn't what he was thinking. As for what kind of person the Netherworld Emperor was, Tian had never seen him before. However, he had heard a lot about the Netherworld Emperor. Moreover, the relationship between the Netherworld Emperor and Cher was special. This made things even more difficult for Tian. The resurrection of the Netherworld Emperor was inevitable and unstoppable. If the Netherworld Emperor wanted to take revenge and annex the 9 realms after resurrection, Tian definitely wouldn't allow him to do so. At that time, Tian would definitely kill the Netherworld Emperor, not for Yuli, but for himself. The other possibility was that the Netherworld Emperor was willing to return to the Jiuli demon realm with the ancient Ming race and not attack the other 9 ancient races. Tian naturally wouldn't kill him. However, Tian estimated that this possibility was almost 0. Therefore, there would definitely be a life and death battle between him and the Netherworld Emperor in the future. However, he emphasized that even if he killed the Netherworld Emperor in the future, It wouldn't be for Yu Li, but for himself. Nie Tian shared his thoughts with Fat Cat and finally said, "Although Yu Li is dead, I will definitely do what I promised him." Fat Cat nodded and then smiled bitterly. "The Netherworld Emperor is dead. Our biggest problem now is how to leave this place." Nie Tian also smiled bitterly. This was indeed a difficult matter. He had come with Lian Jiufeng. The latter definitely knew how to leave the Dark Sea Hell, but Nie Tian did not. Yuli probably knew about it, but it was a pity that he was already dead. Nie Tian's current state was very poor, so he was not in a hurry. He planned to rest for a few days and wait until he had completely recovered. 5 days later, in the Dark Emperor Hall, 2 figures stood side by side. They were Nie Tian and the Spiritualist. At this time, Nie Tian had already recovered to his peak state, and his whole body was releasing a sharp aura. The Spirit Controller's condition also gradually recovered. None of the 7 city lords who had followed Nie Tian had died, and all of them had survived. Moreover, the Spiritualist was now the new Dark Emperor of the Dark Sea Prison. Originally, the city lords wanted Nie Tian to be the Dark Emperor, but Nie Tian had no interest in being the Dark Emperor, so they let the Spiritualist take the position. The other city lords naturally did not object. These few days, Nie Tian had been thinking about how to leave the Dark Sea Prison. He came to see the Spiritualist for this matter. "Lord Dark Emperor, do you know where the exit of the Dark Sea Prison is?" Nie Tian did not beat around the bush and asked directly. The Spiritualist frowned and shook his head helplessly. If he knew where the exit was, he would have left long ago. "This is troublesome." Nie Tian smiled bitterly with a helpless expression. "Lord Nie Tian, have you heard of a person, Prison Emperor Yi Qinghai?" At this time, the Spiritualist seemed to have thought of something and asked Nie Tian. "Yi Qinghai." Nie Tian was stunned when he heard this name, and his expression stiffened. Of course, he was familiar with the name, Yi Qinghai. He did not know why the Spiritualist would suddenly mention Yi Qinghai. But in the next moment, he understood. Yi Qinghai was the only person who escaped from the Dark Sea Prison. "Looks like Lord Nie Tian knows about Yi Qinghai." Seeing Nie Tian's expression, the Spiritualist smiled and said, "Yi Qinghai escaped from the Dark Sea Prison. How'd he do it?" Nie Tian did not say much and asked directly. The Spiritualist shook his head slightly and laughed. "Speaking of this person, he can be considered a legend. He was originally a prisoner, but for some reason, he was taken in as a subordinate by the Dark Emperor and became the Prison Emperor. His position in the Dark Sea Prison was second only to the Dark Emperor. Afterwards, he brought a few of his subordinates and escaped from the Dark Sea Prison, angering the Dark Emperor." At this point, the Spiritualist's eyes flickered and he said carefully, "I heard that Yi Qinghai escaped from the Dark Emperor's hall." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed and he was surprised. He did not expect that Yi Qinghai's title as the Prison Emperor came from this. He did not expect Yi Qinghai to escape from the Dark Emperor's hall. In the next moment, Nie Tian reacted and his eyes turned hot. He said in shock, "Doesn't this mean that the exit of the Dark Sea Prison is in the Dark Emperor's hall?" "I thought so too." The Spiritualist nodded and frowned. "Lord Nie Tian, to be honest, I have been looking for this exit for the past few days, but I haven't found it. The Dark Emperor's hall is not big. It's only a few thousand meters wide. If the exit is really here, why can't I find it?" After saying that, the Spiritualist frowned even deeper. He was very confused. QL11 Nie Tian's eyes flickered, and he was also confused. The Spiritualist was a beast tamer master, and his senses were very strong. If even he could not find the exit, it meant that the exit was really hidden. After a moment of pondering, Nie Tian said straightforwardly, "Lord Dark Emperor, why don't I take charge of the Dark Emperor Palace for 3 days?" The Spiritualist was stunned at first and then nodded in agreement. Of course he knew that Nie Tian wanted to find the exit in peace. Then, the Spiritualist did not stay any longer. He left the hall and asked everyone to retreat. Without his orders, no one was allowed to go near the Dark Emperor's hall. The exit of the Dark Sea Prison must be in this great hall. Standing alone in the great hall, Nie Tian scanned every corner with his gaze. Then he started to release the universe boundary and sensed every inch of space in the hall. If the exit was in the hall, It must be a space-time door. No matter how weak the space-time aura was, Nyetion could sense it with the universe boundary. However, to his disappointment, after he sensed every space, he did not find anything out of the ordinary. Nyetion had a strange look on his face. Then, he sensed it again but still found nothing. Feeling helpless, he prepared to let June ouching out of the 9 extremities. After all, the latter's ability to sense the space-time aura was above his. However, at this moment, the fat cat's voice was heard. She seemed to have discovered something and shouted in surprise, "Nyetion, the Dark Emperor's throne." The Dark Emperor's throne? Nyetion was stunned. He moved and came to the dragon-carved throne in the center of the hall. He looked at the throne and did not find anything strange. This throne is a secret door. Hit hard. Just as Nyetion was feeling confused, the fat cat's voice was heard again. Nyetion's eyes flickered as he slammed his palm heavily onto the chair. Rumble! A rumbling sound rang out, and the chair actually caved in a few inches. Then a strange scene occurred. Boom! 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 The ground behind Nyetion began to collapse, and the boulders moved downwards in a certain pattern like a maze. In the blink of an eye, an underground secret room appeared under Nyetion's feet. Chapter 2452. Before Nyetion entered the dark room, he could already feel a strong space-time aura. He was very sure that the exit of the Dark Sea prison was in the dark room. Suppressing his astonishment, Nyetion's figure blurred into motion as he stepped into the room. QL11 in an instant, he felt a mysterious aura surging in the dark room, giving him an indescribable sense of comfort. What aura is this? Nyetion asked as he stopped in his tracks. It should be some kind of holy power, Fat Cat said calmly, her eyes twinkling. The aura of Saint Power? Nyetion exclaimed with a surprised expression. How could there be Saint Power in this place? Holy power was a form of energy that was of a higher level than bright spirit energy. It should not have appeared in the realms. I don't know either. Fat Cat shook her head in confusion. Let's hurry up and find the exit. Nyetion nodded. He could not absorb holy power now anyway. To him, holy power was something that he could only dream of. No matter how much holy power there was, it would not be of any practical help to him. Then, Nyetion released the cosmic boundary again and sensed everything in the dark room. It's here. After a while, he focused his eyes on a painting and shouted excitedly. In the center of the painting, there was a tiny dot of light that released a weak space-time aura. But if one carefully sensed it, one would realize that the space-time in the dot of light was very vast, as though it contained the universe. This is amazing, Nyetion exclaimed, his expression one of astonishment. It was obvious that the tiny dot of light was the exit of the Dark Sea prison. He did not expect that the exit was on a painting. To be exact, what Nyetion was looking at wasn't a painting, but rather a map. But the words on the map were very strange. Nyetion could not understand them at all. He could only vaguely make out that it was a map. What kind of map is this? After calming down, Nyetion could not help but ask. The fat cat's figure appeared directly. Looking at the map in front of her, the cat was actually stunned. Her deep blue eyes shone brightly, as though she had just discovered something incredible. Fat, are you all right? Nyetion was even more puzzled when he saw Fat Cat staring blankly. The fat cat didn't seem to hear him. Her eyes were fixed on the map, and her lips were trembling slightly. She was so excited that she couldn't speak. Fat, what's wrong? Nyetion was even more puzzled when he saw Fat Cat's reaction, so he couldn't help but ask. He had been with Fat Cat for a long time, but he had never seen the latter so shocked. Subconsciously, Nyetion felt that the map in front of him must have a great background. The fat cat stared blankly for more than 10 seconds before she finally came to her senses, as if she had just woken up from a dream. The Book of 9 Elements. This must be the legendary Book of 9 Elements. The Book of 9 Elements? What's that? Nyetion's face was blank as he stood rooted to the ground. He had no idea what the fat cat was talking about. But the Book of 9 Elements seemed to have something to do with the 9 elements of heaven and earth. Nyetion, this is the Book of 9 Elements the Book of 9 Elements. The fat cat spoke again. She was extremely excited, and her fat body was actually dancing with joy. Nietion's expression became even more dazed. He stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to do for a long time. The fat cat's actions seemed to be a little too happy. What was the Book of 9 Elements to make the fat cat so excited? After a long time, the fat cat finally calmed down. Her expression was much more relaxed, but she couldn't help but smile. I really didn't expect that we would actually find the Book of 9 Elements here. Fat, what exactly is the Book of 9 Elements? Is it terrifying? Nietion couldn't help but ask with a puzzled expression. It's more than terrifying, the fat cat exclaimed excitedly. Nietion, to be able to obtain the Book of 9 Elements, your dog T luck is really great. Nietion was speechless. This wasn't dog T luck. He clearly found the underground secret room after much effort. The Book of 9 Elements, the legendary holy book of the heaven-punishing sacred world. It records the formation of the 9 elements of heaven and earth, as well as the many secrets of the heaven-punishing sacred world. The fat cat took 3 consecutive breaths and finally calmed down a lot, but she still said excitedly. Nietion's eyes narrowed when he heard the fat cat's words. The Book of 9 Elements was actually the holy book of the heaven-punishing sacred world. This name was too famous. The all-heavens sacred world was the world where the sages resided. Moreover, the things recorded in the Book of 9 Elements were also very terrifying. It was actually about the formation of the 9 elements of heaven and earth, as well as the secrets of the heaven-punishing sacred world. This Book of 9 Elements was really an incomparably terrifying thing. Fat, why do I feel that the Book of 9 Elements is like a map? Nietion frowned and asked in confusion. The Book of 9 Elements exists in many forms. What we are seeing now is only one of the forms of the holy book. The fat cat chuckled and said, "We must take the Book of 9 Elements with us." Take it with us? Nietion was stunned for a moment. He said in shock, "The Book of 9 Elements is the exit of the Dark Sea prison. If we take it with us, won't the people in the Dark Sea prison be unable to leave? What does it have to do with you whether they can leave or not?" The fat cat retorted snappily. Her eyes were filled with disdain when she looked at Nietion. Nietion's face darkened. He was speechless. Whether the people in the Dark Sea prison could leave or not did not have much to do with him. Moreover, even if he did not take the Book of 9 Elements with him, the spiritualist and the others would not be able to find it. Most importantly, the 9 realms and the Dark Sea prison were currently in harmony. If an exit suddenly appeared, it would be hard to say what would happen. Thinking of this, Nietion decided to take the Book of 9 Elements with him. Next, Nietion directly imprinted his soul imprint on the Book of 9 Elements. This way, he would be the owner of the Book of 9 Elements. After doing all this, Nietion nodded slightly. He was very satisfied. Just the soul imprint is not enough. Drip your blood on it again. The fat cat was still worried and said with a chuckle. Nietion was stunned for a moment and curled his lips slightly. The fat cat valued the Book of 9 Elements too much. It was as if she was afraid that someone would snatch it away. However, he still decided to do it. Nietion took a step forward and dripped a drop of blood on the Book of 9 Elements with his fingertip. Just as the blood dripped down, a strange scene appeared. Boom! The space-time dot in the center of the Book of 9 Elements seemed to be stimulated. It suddenly went berserk and continuously released a terrifying space-time aura. What's going on? The sudden scene caused Nietion to be stunned. Watch out! At this moment, the fat cat seemed to have sensed something and suddenly let out a strange cry. Boom! The next moment, before Nietion could even react, he felt a strong space-time power sweep him up and pull him into a space-time vortex. Chapter 2453. The sudden influx of space-time power put immense pressure on Nietion, and he couldn't help but let out a miserable shriek. In the next moment, he directly fainted. After an unknown period of time, Nietion woke up again, but this time he was back in the forbidden zone of the 9 realms. Fat! The moment Nietion woke up, the first thing he saw was a fat cat's face. He then looked around and found that the environment had completely changed. He couldn't help but ask in surprise, "We left the Dark Sea prison?" "Yes, we have returned to the Forbidden Zone." The fat cat chuckled and said, "Nietian, you slept really deeply this time. You slept for 3 days and 3 nights." 3 days and 3 nights? Nietian let out an exclamation as he slowly rose to his feet. Feeling a bit dizzy, he shook his head vigorously. He only remembered that he was suppressed by space-time pressure and then fainted. He didn't remember anything else. He really didn't expect the space-time pressure to be so strong that it made Nietian unconscious for 3 days and 3 nights. After calming down, Nietian asked in confusion, "Fat, what happened?" But up until now, he still didn't know what happened. "Just a small accident. It's fine now." The fat cat didn't explain and instead waved its paw and said, "The most important thing is that you are now the owner of the Book of 9 Elements." The Book of 9 Elements. Nietian saw the map in Fat's paw. It was the Book of 9 Elements, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "We really brought the Book of 9 Elements out. Of course we have to bring out such a good thing." The fat cat chuckled and directly threw the Book of 9 Elements to Nietian, saying, "It's all in the holy language. I don't understand it either." If you want to read the Book of 9 Elements, you need to find someone who understands the holy language. Nietian's eyes narrowed, and his face was full of black lines. The fat cat couldn't understand the Book of 9 Elements. Nietian did not expect this. He thought that fat cat knew the contents of the Book of Saints. "These are all holy words. Unless I grew 9 tails, I might be able to understand them." The fat cat could tell what Nietian was thinking, so it said in annoyance. Nietian frowned and didn't want to say anything. If even Fat Cat couldn't understand the Book of 9 Elements, who else could? Although I don't know what is recorded in the Book of Saints, I can make a guess. At this moment, the fat cat chuckled and said proudly, "What did you guess?" Nietian raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, "This is a map. What is recorded on it should be the distribution of the 9 great origin powers," the fat cat said with a solemn expression. Nietian's eyes trembled and he was stunned. He didn't expect the Book of 9 Elements to record the distribution of the 9 great origin powers. And now, he was looking for the origin of wood, which was one of the 9 great origins. Didn't that mean that as long as he could understand the Book of 9 Elements, he would know the location of the wood origin powers? "Fatty, are you sure?" Nietian's eyes burned with excitement as he asked. "I'm sure." The fat cat was very confident and nodded heavily. Then it moved and returned to the origin embryo space. "If that's the case, then I have to find someone who can understand the holy words." Nietian smiled faintly, and a hint of hope appeared on his face. As he spoke, he put away the Book of 9 Elements. Next, he planned to return to the Fengyan Alliance and ask Nye Dao. Maybe Nye Dao knew someone who could understand the holy words. He looked around and quickly confirmed that he was in the Demon Ceiling mountain range. It would take a few days to travel from the Demon Ceiling mountain range to 9 Heaven City. In order to avoid loneliness, Nietian opened the 9 superbs and let June Ouching out. During this time, June Ouching had been recuperating in the 9 superbs. Last time, when she helped Nietian merge the 3 bodies, she had used up too much energy. "Nietian, are we back?" June Ouching asked in surprise when she came out of the 9 superbs and saw that the surroundings had changed. "We're back." Nietian smiled faintly and asked, "Why didn't that little girl Qingwan come out to get some fresh air?" Hearing Nietian mention Sister Qingwan, June Ouching couldn't help but laugh and said, "Sister Qingwan didn't want to come out. She said she wanted to accompany her little ice cube." Nietian frowned and was speechless. Of course, he knew that the little ice cube Nye Qingwan was talking about was EMO of the Frostwing clan. It was strange that Nye Qingwan seemed to be very interested in EMO. If that's the case, then let her stay in the ice and snow. Nietian didn't think too much and said with a faint smile, "Okay." June Ouching nodded slightly, and her delicate face suddenly blushed. She said in an extremely low voice, "It's just the 2 of us. It's pretty good." Nietian smiled when he heard June Ouching's words, but he didn't feel very happy in his heart. He wasn't a block of wood. How could he not understand June Ouching's intentions? However, he already had 3 girls by his side. Wouldn't June Ouching mind? Ouching, let's go. Nie Tian didn't think too much and said with a faint smile. June Ouching nodded and naturally held Nie Tian's arm. Nie Tian smiled and felt a surge of warmth in his heart. He was very happy. However, at this moment, a vigorous and violent voice broke the warmth of this moment. Kid from the Nye clan, you won't be leaving today. A violent voice rolled out and a black-clothed figure appeared. A pair of cold eyes stared at Nie Tian. The newcomer's aura was majestic and vigorous. He stood in the void like a mountain. Zhou Shan. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and looked at the black-clothed figure. He shouted a name in a deep voice. Nie Tian was no stranger to this black-clothed figure. It was the head of the Zhou clan, Zhou Shan. Previously, Nie Tian was chased by Zhou Shan. If it weren't for Gue Wu Quang Sha, he would have died in this person's hands. He didn't expect this guy to appear again. Obviously, Zhou Shan was here for the Lei vein source in Nie Tian's body. Nie Tian already knew that the Lei vein source the Zhou clan was looking for was precisely the Earth Essence. Kid from the Nye clan, it's been a long time since we last met. Your strength has improved really quickly, Zhou Shan said coldly as he looked at Nie Tian. His eyes were cold and murderous, but at the same time, he couldn't conceal his surprise. The last time he saw Nie Tian, it had only been a few years. At that time, Nie Tian was only a high god. And now, Nie Tian was already a late paramount god. Such a terrifying increase in strength was absolutely monstrous. Patriarch Zhou, your strength has improved really slowly. You're still in the same place, Nie Tianling said with a cold smile. Zhou Shan had long been a peak paramount god. A few years to him was like the blink of an eye. He would probably remain at this level for the rest of his life. Brat, are you looking down on me? Zhou Shan growled. His entire body's aura surged. He was obviously furious. QL11, but in that moment, he seemed to sense something. His expression flickered as he looked into the distance and growled. Who's there? In the next moment, the void trembled slightly and a black-robed figure appeared. Immediately, the space was filled with extremely dense, killing intent. The black-clothed figure radiated a murderous aura that spread out for tens of thousands of meters. It was incomparably terrifying. Nie Tian looked at the black-clothed figure and couldn't help but tremble. 7 kills. Chapter 2454. 7 kills. Nie Tian's heart sank as he looked up at the figure in the sky. He had never imagined that he would run into 7 kills here. 7 kills towered in the air, his killing intent surging like the sea. He seemed like an abyss of killing intent. What a powerful killing intent. Zhou Shan couldn't help but exclaim. He had never seen such a terrifying killing intent before. It was hard to imagine that someone could release such a terrifying killing intent. After calming down, Zhou Shan asked, Who are you, sir? He's mine, 7 kills said. He pointed at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice, Get lost. Then he fixed his gaze on Zhou Shan and said coldly, Get lost. His voice was as cold as ice, filled with boundless arrogance and killing intent. Zhou Shan's brows furrowed slightly, and his face instantly became gloomy. He was the head of the Zhou clan, one of the 9 great clans. How could he accept being told to scram? Although 7 kills radiated a powerful killing aura, he was still only a late paramount god. As far as Zhou Shan was concerned, 7 kills was no match for him. Little brat, do you know who I am? Zhou Shan spoke in a low voice. His entire body's chi surged, extremely vast and mighty. QL11 Zhou Shan's strength was very close to that of a peak godly expert. He was even stronger than a half-step peak expert like Ghost Fiend Wild Sand. A half-step peak expert was a realm that didn't exist. It referred to those who were weaker than peak godly experts, but far stronger than peak paramount gods. For example, Yi Qinghai and Ghost Fiend Wild Sand were both half-step peak experts. As for Zhou Shan, he was a bit stronger than Ghost Fiend Wild Sand, but not by much. He had yet to reach peak godly strength. However, he thought highly of himself. At the very least, he didn't consider 7 kills and Nie Tian as equals. After all, they were only late paramount gods. This is your last warning. Scram. 7 kills replied coldly. The killing intent in his eyes was like an ice house, sending chills down one's spine. In an instant, Zhou Shan felt a killing intent lock onto him, and he couldn't help but feel a chill. It felt as if he was standing on the edge of a cliff. If he wasn't careful, he would be crushed to pieces. But in the next moment, he calmed down. His face darkened as he furiously said, "Brat, you are too insolent." Zhou Shan's voice had barely faded when he moved. He struck out with his palm, and suddenly the air was filled with yellow sand. A giant hand made of yellow sand appeared, and like a sandstorm, it slammed down on 7 kills. "You're courting death." Chisha's eyes darkened as he spat out 2 words with a cold smile. Following this, one of his eyes shuddered slightly as a thunderous force burst out from it. Kaboom! The thunder was like a dragon, resounding through the 9 heavens. The void suddenly trembled, and the giant yellow sand hand directly collapsed. Bang! Immediately after, a muffled sound was heard. Zhou Shan's figure was directly sent flying, drawing a bloody trail in the air. Just as his figure was still in mid-air, it suddenly trembled. His body couldn't withstand the power of the thunderous force and exploded, turning into a bloody light. The sudden scene made Nietion's eyes freeze, and he couldn't hide the shock in his heart. Chisha's strength was so overwhelming. One move, just one move, and he killed Zhou Shan in an instant. One had to know that Zhou Shan was more powerful than a half-peak expert. Moreover, Zhou Shan's status was very high. He was one of the 9 family heads. It was no exaggeration to say that Zhou Shan was someone who stood at the peak of the 9 realms. However, such a character had actually died just like that. It was simply a strange death. Chisha's killing intent was too strong. He didn't care who Zhou Shan was, he killed him directly. A dignified family head had died so easily. It was inconceivable. Nietion was stunned for a few seconds before he calmed down. Then he looked at Chisha. He did not know why Chisha was here. Clearly, Chisha had come for Nietion, and his intentions were unclear. "You saved me, so consider that idiot dead. Consider it interest." Chisha blurred into motion, coming face to face with Nietion. The two of them were less than 1,000 meters apart, which was a very dangerous distance. Nietion's eyes narrowed. Killing one of the 9 family heads was just for interest? Chisha's tone was really arrogant. Nietion was very surprised. Chisha's devil eye of extreme slaughter was a combination of lightning-type 9 howls of violet lightning and wind-type pole storm. When he used those 2 powers, he was even stronger than Nangong Lin and Xinyuan Yinzhou. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to use the 9 howls of violet lightning to kill Zhou Shan. Chisha had recovered his strength very quickly. In just 10 short days, he was already a late paramount god. It was hard to say exactly how strong Chisha was now. Nietion was very calm and smiled faintly. "You're here just to pay interest?" Chisha said coldly. Every word of his was filled with killing intent. He said, "I'm here to kill you. However, you saved my life. Before I return the favor, I won't kill you." Nietion's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected Chisha to be so direct. Chuckling, he said, "So you're here just to tell me that?" "There's one more thing," Chisha said, his lips curling into a smile that made him seem even colder than before. Then his eyes trembled and he said directly, "Let me see how strong you are." "See how strong I am?" Nietion said, a bit taken aback. However, at that moment, 7 kills moved. He threw out a palm strike, and the shadow of the ultimate killing palm appeared, whistling like thunder as it shot towards Nietion. Nietion was taken aback, and his face tightened. But then he reacted. He spread his arms, sending out 2 bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains that looked like 2 wild serpents. Rumble. The chains moved at the same time, howling as they collided with the palm projection. A huge boom rang out, and boundless power spread out, wreaking havoc in the air. Nietion was knocked back several hundred meters. He steadied himself, his eyes narrowing as he thought to himself, "This guy really is terrifying. I can't believe a casual palm strike like that is so strong." Chi was terrifyingly strong. Just a casual palm strike was enough to knock back Nietion. Nietion estimated that Chi was almost at the peak of the god realm, and was probably not inferior to experts like Earth Champion or Nangong Duxiu. Furthermore, Nietion had a feeling that 7 Kill strength was still growing at an insane rate. It wouldn't be long before he became even stronger. Kid, why do you have the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains in your body? Suddenly, Chi face darkened as he shouted. At that moment, the aura around him became violent, and his murderous intent surged like wind blades, cold and sharp. He didn't expect Nietion to have the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains in his body. Chapter 2455. 7 Kills stared coldly at Nietion, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Just now, he did not want to kill Nietion, but now he wanted to kill him. The bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains was the emperor of the underworld's ultimate skill. It was formed from the cursed shackles. How could it be in Nietion's body? If Nietion was hit by the cursed shackles, he should be in great pain. How could he control the cursed shackles so easily? 7 Kills could not understand all of this. I killed the Dark Emperor. I got the cursed shackles from him. Nietion was not afraid and said calmly. He did not tell the truth. Instead, he lied. You killed the Dark Emperor? 7 Kills, pupils constricted. 2 vortexes appeared in his demon eye of extreme kill. It was extremely strange and seemed to have the ability to cut through space. He did not expect Nietion to be able to kill the Dark Emperor. The Dark Emperor was the person he hated the most. He hated him even more than Nye Fenghua. His original plan was to return to Dark Prison and kill the Dark Emperor personally after he recovered his strength. What he did not expect was that the Dark Emperor had already been killed by Nietion. Can I? Nietion smiled and said, shouldn't you be happy that the Dark Emperor is dead? The Dark Emperor had tortured 7 Kills. He took away his demon eye of extreme kill, turned him into a scaled demon, and even left the word slave on his face. Such a cruel method was infuriating. Now that the Dark Emperor was dead, 7 Kills was not happy at all. Instead, he was furious. You killed the Dark Emperor. What right do you have to kill him? What right do you have to kill him? In an instant, 7 Kills seemed to have gone berserk. He roared like a beast and shouted, his life is mine. Only I can kill him. When Nietion saw 7 Kills go berserk, he could not help but tremble. It seemed like 7 Kills hated the Dark Emperor to the extreme. Only by killing him personally could he dispel the hatred in his heart. It had to be said that the Dark Emperor had tortured 7 Kills badly. Stinking brat, you killed the Dark Emperor, so you can die in his place. At that moment, Chi suddenly raised his eyes and stared at Nietion. He let out a fierce roar and moved. He violently slammed his palm down towards Nietion. Nietion went blank for a moment, somewhat caught off guard. 7 Kills had just said that he would not kill him now. Why did he suddenly go back on his word? However, Nietion reacted quickly. He raised his hand and slapped out. 4 bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains shot out at the same time. They coiled around each other and pounced out like raging dragons. Boom! In the next moment, the 2 forces collided with each other, causing a violent explosion that reverberated in the void. Nietion instantly retreated and stabilized himself 1,000 meters away. Chi also retreated, but his bloodthirsty eyes were like those of a wolf, staring at Nietion. Nietion had to use 4 bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains to block this palm. It was enough to show how powerful 7 Kills was. Die! However, at that moment, 7 Kills was like a raging beast. His murderous intent permeated tens of thousands of meters in the air. In the midst of his violent roar, 7 Kills punched out. 2 murderous fist shadows howled. Like thunder from the 9 heavens, they smashed down towards Nietion. Seeing this, Nietion's body shook. 9 bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains appeared and circled around him, forming a cursed shield. Bang! Bang! Then, the 2 murderous fist shadows landed, but were blocked by the cursed shield and shattered. Nietion retreated slightly, and blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Although the spell shield had blocked the power of the fish shadows, it had still impacted Nietion. The 7 kills was simply too powerful. Nietion found it very difficult to deal with the 7 kills Sek's continuous attacks. However, the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains were equally terrifying. It seemed to be able to restrain 7 kills' murderous intent. Die! Once again, 7 kills roared. His body was like a ray of murderous light as he sent out a palm shadow. At the same time, his eyes trembled and a bolt of lightning shot out. This time, 7 kills used the demon eyes of Supreme Killer. The terrifying 9 roars of purple thunder formed a lightning net that enveloped Nietion. Nietion's eyes couldn't help but tremble when he felt the incomparably violent lightning force pressing down on him. The power of the 9 roars of purple thunder merged with the demon eyes of Supreme Killer was terrifying and unimaginable. Nietion, be careful. Seeing this scene, Jun Ouching's beautiful eyes couldn't help but tremble, and she cried out. Boom! In an instant, Nietion did not hesitate. The 9 dragon veins in his body revolved crazily. Endless dragon chi gushed out and formed a crimson dragon in midair. This was the first time he used the sovereign dragon vein after merging with the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains. This was the first time he used the sovereign dragon vein after merging with the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains. Roar! The moment the crimson dragon formed, it roared at the sky. The sky and earth seemed to tremble. 9 bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains coiled around the crimson dragon's body. It looked extremely terrifying. The soul-shackling fire burned in the air, and the flames were violet. Bang! The next moment, the murderous fist shadow was the first to land. However, it was crushed by the crimson dragon. Boom! Following that, the purple lightning net fell down and collided with the giant red dragon. The air rumbled continuously, and ear-piercing noises could be heard. The purple thunder net and the crimson dragon were both lightning-type powers. However, under the support of the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains, the dragon's power was even more violent. Crack, crack, crack! In just an instant, the purple lightning net began to crumble. It exploded into pieces and turned into lightning that dissipated in the air. Roar! At that moment, a violent dragon roar was heard. The crimson dragon's body was like a mountain, crashing down on Chi Sha. Chi Sha felt the majestic power coming at him. He immediately felt a sense of oppression. His demonic eyes could not help but reveal a look of horror. Bang! Before he could react, the crimson figure landed with a loud bang. With a muffled sound, his figure flew backward, leaving a bloody trail in the air. After a long time, the dragon chi in the air gradually dissipated. Chi Sha's figure appeared again. This time, he was dripping with blood. He stood trembling in the air like a leaf, about to fall to the ground at any time. His eyes were fixed on Nietion with incomparable astonishment. Apparently, he was extremely shocked. He did not expect that he would be defeated by Nietion. Nietion's figure stood tall. The aura around his body had dissipated, but his star-like eyes were still extremely sharp. He was also confused. In fact, his aura was not stronger than Chi Sha's. In fact, it was slightly weaker. However, when the two of them fought head-on, the winner was Nietion. It seemed that the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains greatly suppressed Chi Sha's power. Otherwise, Nietion might not have been Chi Sha's opponent. Bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains. Chi Sha's body trembled slightly. The corners of his mouth twitched as he spoke viciously. How could he not know that his crushing defeat had a lot to do with the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains? The bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains belonged to the Emperor of the Underworld. It greatly suppressed the power of the heaven-punishing Devil Heart 3 embodiment. However, he still did not understand how Nietion could merge with the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains. Nietion, I really did not expect you to have the bone-corroding, soul-shackling chains. At this moment, a low voice sounded and a figure appeared. QL 11, Chapter 2456. Nietion looked at Lian Jiofeng and couldn't help but frown. He hadn't expected this guy to appear as well. Jiufeng. 7 Kills looked at Lian Jiufeng and called out. Lian Jiufeng nodded slightly, but he stared closely at Nie Tian with a playful expression. Lian Jiufeng, what are you doing here? Nie Tian asked directly. Lian Jiufeng's lips twitched, but he smiled faintly. He looked at 7 Kills and said, 7 Kills, it's time to get down to business. 7 Kills nodded slightly. His aura had actually recovered quite a bit. When he saw the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains just now, he had been impulsive and failed to control himself. Lian Jiufeng's arrival calmed him down. You're Nie Fenghua's son? 7 Kills' eyes were dark, but his killing intent was not as strong as before. He asked cold. Yes. Nie Tian nodded. He felt a little strange. Why would 7 Kills suddenly ask such a question? You are stronger than Nie Fenghua. 7 Kills said coldly, his eyes cold. Nie Tian frowned. He didn't know why 7 Kills mentioned Nie Fenghua. Nie Tan, the inescapable net needs your help. 7 Kills spoke again at this time, his eyes flashing. What help? Nie Tian stilled and then sneered. Why should I help you? Help us find 2 people. 7 Kills ignored Nie Tian's sneer and said directly, if you find these 2 people, the inescapable net can tell you 1 piece of information. Just 1 piece of information? Nie Tian's eyes focused slightly, his expression a little strange. He knew that the conditions raised by the inescapable net were never simple. While it was just 2 people, it would be very dangerous. They wanted Nie Tian to risk his life for just 1 piece of information. This was too good of a plan. Don't get excited. The corner of 7 Kills' mouth twitched slightly as he said, although it's just a piece of information, it's definitely worth it to you. Stop nagging, just say it. Nie Tian frowned as if he realized something and said directly, this news is related to the Tower of Eternal Night. 7 Kills' eyes narrowed slightly, and a strange smile appeared on his face as he looked at Nie Tian with an odd expression. Tower of Eternal Night. Hearing these words, Nie Tian's pupils couldn't help but constrict, and his eyes surged with unconcealable heat. Nie Tian was no stranger to the name of the Eternal Night Tower. When he was in the realm of darkness, he met with the former president of the Holy Council, Bu Wu Qianxiu, who told him that Nie Fenghua was imprisoned in the Tower of Evernight. Bu Wu Qianxiu had also said that the Tower of Evernight was even more heavily guarded than the Dark Sea prison. Those who were imprisoned in the Tower of Eternal Night would never be able to come out. The entrance to the Tower of Eternal Night was a huge space-time vortex. That vortex could only be entered, not exited. Nie Tian didn't expect that 7 Kills would actually mention the Tower of Eternal Night. Humph. Seeing Nie Tian's reaction, 7 Kills couldn't help but sneer and said, it seems that you already know that your father is imprisoned in the Tower of Eternal Night. How do you know? Nie Tian's eyes darkened, and he asked cold. Nie Fenghua was imprisoned in the Tower of Eternal Night. This was what Nie Tian learned from Bu Wu Qianxiu. How did 7 Kills know about this? This is not something you should be concerned about. 7 Kills' eyes were filled with killing intent, and he said coldly, you only need to answer. Are you willing to cooperate with us? Nie Tian's eyes flickered slightly, and his expression kept changing. Who are you looking for? After a moment, Nie Tian said in a deep voice, the ancestor of the Nie family, Nie Dongwang, and the ancestor of the Qi family, Qi Wuxiong. 7 Kills' eyes flashed sharply, and he said these 2 names in an incomparably deep voice. Hearing 7 Kills' words, Nie Tian's expression froze, and he froze in place. He never thought that the people the inescapable net was looking for were the ancestors of the Nie family and the Qi family. But didn't these 2 people die a long time ago? Nie Tian, you must think that Nie Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong died a long time ago, right? At this time, Lian Jiufeng, who had been silent all this time, said darkly, go back and ask the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, and you will naturally know everything. Nie Tian's expression was dark, and he was shocked. 7 Kills and Lian Jiufeng meant that the ancestors of the Nie family and the Qi family were not dead. These 2 people were people from the ancient era. If they were still alive, how old would they be? If they were alive, why hadn't there been any news of them in the Nine Realms? Lion Jiufeng saw Nie Tian's confusion and smiled faintly. He said, Nie Tian, you have been to the Nine-Li Demon Realm, so you should know that there are more than just 9 realms in this world. Nie Tian stilled and raised his head to look at Lion Jiufeng. He asked, you are saying that these 2 ancestors are no longer in the 9 realms? Perhaps. Lion Jiufeng's lips curled into a strange smile. He said, I am not sure. Go back and ask the leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, and he will tell you the truth. Nie Tian's expression abruptly darkened, and his eyes trembled. It seemed that there were other realms beyond the 9 realms. The ancestor of the Nie family, Nie Dongwang, and the ancestor of the Qi family, Qi Wuxiong, might not be dead. Nie Tian, do you want to work with us? Have you thought about it? Lion Jiufeng looked playfully at Nie Tian and asked with a smile. I agree to work with you. Nie Tian's eyes darkened slightly, and he said clearly, very good. Lion Jiufeng laughed and responded, find those 2 people and bring them back to Demon Sealing City in exchange for information about the Eternal Night Tower. It's a deal. Nie Tian nodded heavily, his eyes shining with the light of passion. Nie Tian, good luck. Lion Jiufeng smiled faintly and flashed away with 7 kills. Nie Tian smiled faintly, and the darkness on his face was swept away. The corner of his lips curled into a smile. The ancestors of the Nie family and the Qi family were not dead. They had gone to another world. Nie Tian also wanted to see just who these 2 people were. They must be extraordinary to be able to defeat the Emperor of the Netherworld. At the same time, he was very curious why the inescapable Net was looking for these 2 people. After that, Nie Tian did not think too much and left with Junouching. 3 days later, Wind and Cloud Alliance. 2 figures stood outside the Wind and Cloud Great Hall, one old and one young. They were the Alliance's leader, Nie Dao, and Nie Tian. Nie Tian, you've gained a lot from this trip. Nie Dao's lips curled up slightly after hearing Nie Tian's story. At the same time, he felt Nie Tian's aura and could not hide the pride in his eyes. QL11, he had not thought that Nie Tian's trip to the Dark Sea Black Prison would be so dangerous. He had not thought that Nie Tian would not only save 7 kills, but also Chiwu Yunxiu. Nie Dao felt great guilt towards Chiwu Yunxiu. Back when Nie Fenghua and Chiwu Yunxiu were at their most difficult times, Wind and Cloud Alliance had not been able to protect them. Even now, Nie Dao still felt regret. If he was given another chance, he would not give in even if he had to sacrifice the entire Wind and Cloud Alliance. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. But now, the result was not bad. Nie Tian had grown up, Chiwu Yunxiu had been saved, and while there was no news of Nie Fenghua, at least she was still alive. Chapter 2457. Outside the Wind and Cloud Palace, Nie Tian looked at Nie Dao and faintly smiled. He no longer hesitated and directly said, Grandfather, I actually came to ask for your help. We're family. There's no need to beg. Nie Dao brightly laughed, unable to conceal the love in his eyes as he said, Just say it. As long as Grandpa can do it, I will definitely help. Nie Tian nodded slightly and said, Grandpa, I want to ask you about 2 people. Who is it? Nie Dao's expression darkened when he saw Nie Tian's solemn expression. The Nie family's ancestor, Lord Nie Dongwang, and the Qi family's ancestor, Lord Qi Wuxiong, Nie Tian said with a burning gaze. Nie Dao's eyes trembled when he heard Nie Tian's words. His aged face froze for a moment. He had never imagined that Nie Tian was inquiring about the 2 great ancestors. Nie Tian, do you know something? Nie Dao calmed down and asked in a low voice. I know, the 2 ancestors are still alive. Nie Tian's face was as calm as water, without the slightest ripple. How do you know? Nie Dao's eyes sank as he asked in surprise. Nie Tian did not hide anything and told him about his cooperation with the inescapable Net. Actually, before this, he still had some doubts about whether Nie Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong were still alive. However, Nie Dao's reaction told him that these 2 ancestors were indeed still alive. I see. Nie Dao frowned, and the wrinkles on his face became even more obvious. His eyes kept flickering, as if he was considering something. "Grandfather, this matter concerns father's life and death." Seeing Niet Dao's hesitation, Niet Tian solemnly said, "Even if you're in trouble, please help me." Niet Dao's expression was extremely gloomy. After a long time, he let out a deep breath and bitterly smiled. "Actually, I shouldn't have told you about this, because only the patriarch of the Niet clan has the right to know what was recorded in the Niet clan's ancestors' personal notes." Then, Niet Dao began to talk about the ancestor of the Niet family. It turned out that Niet Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong had joined forces and finally defeated the Emperor of the Underworld, and the two of them had found out from the Emperor of the Underworld that there were other domains outside of the 9 regions. After that, the two ancestors had some differences, which caused the Niet clan and the Qi clan to turn against each other. After that, Niet Dongwang went to the world outside the 9 regions alone and was never heard from again. As for whether Qi Wuxiong was still alive, Niet Dongwang's notes did not state it clearly. But judging from some of the things he recorded, Qi Wuxiong should still be alive. That's all I know. After speaking, Niet Dao smiled helplessly. In his opinion, it was impossible to find Niet Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong. He even felt that Niet Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong might already be dead. Niet Tian nodded slightly, but his expression was very solemn. Niet Dao's words were not very useful to him. They only served to prove his speculation. Niet Dongwang had gone to another domain, while Qi Wuxiong's whereabouts were unknown. Niet Tian guessed that Qi Wuxiong should also have gone to another domain. After all, Niet Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong were both the strongest in the 9 regions at that time. There was no longer any possibility of advancing in the 9 major domains, so it was better to go to another domain and perhaps have an opportunity to advance further. But the most troublesome thing now was that Niet Tian did not know where Niet Dongwang and Qi Wuxiong had gone. He did not even know where the domains outside of the 9 regions were. "Niet Tian, this matter is a little troublesome. It's too difficult to find the two ancestors." Niet Dao looked at Niet Tian and said with a troubled expression. Niet Tian forced out a faint smile and nodded, but didn't say anything. No matter how difficult this matter was, he had to do it. After all, this concerned Ye Fenghua. "Grandpa, do you know if there's anyone in the 9 realms who can read the holy runes?" Niet Tian asked with a faint smile. "QL 11-inch holy text?" When Niet Dao heard these 2 words, he was confused. He had never heard of holy text before. He couldn't help asking, "What is it?" "Nothing." Niet Tian could not help but laugh bitterly when he saw Niet Dao's reaction and waved his hand. Niet Dao was taken aback. Knowing that Niet Tian didn't want to talk about it, he didn't ask further. Instead, he said, "Niet Tian, you've just returned from the Dark Sea prison. Why don't you rest in the Wind and Cloud Alliance for a while?" "No need." Niet Tian smiled faintly. "I will be leaving soon. I have other things to do." Of course he wanted to rest, but he did not have much time left. Everything was urgent and crowded together. It was as if there were many swords hanging in his heart. Any one of them could be fatal. Among his 9 extremities, there was the EMO of the cold demon wings. He needed to find an extremely cold object within 3 months to provide him with cold energy to grow a second pair of cold demon wings. Otherwise, EMO would be frozen to death by the cold demon cocoon he formed. And if something happened to EMO, Qi Wuxiong would also be unfrozen. At that time, the situation would be just as dangerous. Niet Tian still needed to find the heart of 10,000 wood and awaken Qi Wuxiong. And now, he had another troublesome matter to deal with. He needed to find the 2 ancestors. With so many things weighing on his heart, how could he rest? "Niet Tian, it has been hard on you." Niet Dao sighed with a guilty expression. He really wanted to help Niet Tian, but there were some things that only Niet Tian could do. "Grandfather, I'm leaving." Niet Tian did not stay any longer. He prepared to leave for the Yu clan. He still had a token in his hand that he needed to pass to the Yu clan's patriarch. "Be careful." Niet Dao nodded his head slightly. His old eyes were slightly moist. Boom! However, at this moment, the sky above suddenly trembled in a strange manner. After that, a black-clothed figure appeared, and he stood towering in the sky like a strange mountain. He was precipitous, magnificent, and sharp. Niet Dao's gaze sharpened slightly. He then looked at the black-robed figure. The moment he sensed the aura of the figure, his expression stiffened. The figure's aura was sometimes vigorous, sometimes weak, sometimes sharp, and sometimes heavy. It was unpredictable and extremely strange. What shocked Niet Dao even more was that he could faintly feel that the person's strength was not any weaker than his. In the entire 9 territories, the number of people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with Niet Dao could be counted on one hand, and they were all people he was familiar with. However, he had never seen the person in front of him before. "May I know who you are? What brings you to the Wind and Cloud Alliance?" Niet Dao calmed down and spoke in a deep voice. His voice was as powerful as thunder. It was obvious that he was trying to intimidate his opponent to tell him that he, Niet Dao, was not a pushover. However, the black-robed man acted as if he hadn't heard Niet Dao's words. His eyes were as sharp as an eagle's as he stared fixedly at Niet Tian. A trace of a smile hung at the corner of his mouth, making him look extremely strange. This person is coming for me." Niet Tian's heart suddenly sank when he felt the black-clothed man's gaze, and he secretly cried out in alarm. The black-robed figure had been staring at Niet Tian since he appeared, as if Niet Dao was nothing. Chapter 2458. Niet Tian was astonished. He did not expect the mysterious elder to be here for him. But strangely enough, he did not recognize this person. "May I know who you are? Why have you come to the Wind and Cloud Alliance?" At this moment, Niet Dao's voice resounded once again like thunder. The elder's attitude infuriated him. No one in the 9 territories dared to ignore him like this. Even the leader of the Sacred Union, 9 Gods Calamity, did not dare to ignore Niet Dao. Who was this insolent person? "Kid, hand it over." Once again, the black-clothed old man completely ignored Niet Dao, and his eyes stared fixedly at Niet Tian as he spoke in a deep voice. His voice was strange. It was hoarse and deep, containing an oppressive force. At the same time, it sounded ethereal. It felt as if he was in a different dimension from Niet Tian and the others. "Something? What is it?" Niet Tian went blank for a moment, his face filled with confusion. He had no idea what the elder was talking about. He did not know the elder at all, so why would he take something from him? "Something you won't understand." The elder spoke again with a hint of mockery. Niet Tian was startled. He immediately understood what the elder was talking about, and his eyes quivered. At this moment, he knew what the elder wanted. The Book of 9 Primordial. "It seems that you know what I want. Hand it over." The black-robed old man spoke indifferently. Although it was not a commanding tone, that kind of arrogant attitude made people feel very uncomfortable. "What if I don't?" Niet Tian's expression darkened as he replied coldly. "Do you have a choice?" The black-costumed old man laughed. His laughter was extremely arrogant and indifferent. It was as if Niet Tian had a hand over the Book of 9 Primordial. Impudent, Niet Dao could no longer hold it in. He let out a furious roar, and his figure suddenly moved. Golden light blossomed from his body. Bang! After that, he forcefully slapped out his palm, and the god-restraining energy surged out like an ocean. It condensed into a golden palm in midair, and then it smashed towards the old man in black robes. The black-robed old man stood on the spot, not moving at all. A faint layer of flames appeared on his body, making him look like he was on fire. In the next moment, the god-restraining palm descended and a strange scene appeared. Pooh! The instant the palm shadow fell, the black-robed old man's body actually passed through the palm shadow. It was as if he hadn't been attacked at all, and he was still standing there calmly. This, Niet Dao steadied himself. This extremely strange scene caused him to suck in a breath of cold air, and his face was filled with extreme shock. QL11, he had unleashed the power of God's sealing, and yet he had failed to injure his opponent at all. Just what kind of strength did this person have? How could he be so terrifying? When Niet Tian saw this, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed slightly. He was very shocked, but not because of the black-robed old man's strength, but because of the layer of flames around him. From start to finish, the black-robed old man had not used his yuan meridians. He had only relied on that layer of flames to pierce through Niedao's palm. That layer of flames seemed ordinary, but the power contained within it was incomparably terrifying. Furthermore, Nietian felt that even if he used the chaotic flames, he would not be able to contend against the black-robed old man's flames. This did not mean that the chaotic flames were not as powerful as the black-robed old man's flames, but because Nietian's strength was too weak, and he was unable to display the true power of the chaotic flames. Just who are you? Niet Dao was much calmer now. He knew that the opponent's strength was greater than his, so he frowned and asked coldly. However, the black-robed old man still ignored him, and his eyes never left Nietian. He smiled and said, "Kid, you should hand it over to me now." The black-robed old man revealed his shocking strength, as if he wanted to intimidate Nietian enough so that Nietian would willingly hand over the Book of Nine Primordial. "It's mine. Why should I hand it over to you?" Nietian's expression did not show the slightest hint of nervousness or fear. Instead, he had a calm expression as he calmly said, "You may have found it, but it's not yours." The black-robed old man faintly smiled. "Furthermore, I'm not trying to steal it from you. I'm only temporarily keeping it safe for you. It's in my hands, so it's mine." The corner of Nietian's lips curled up. "Since you've come for this, I'm sure you already know that I've bound it with my blood. So, even if I give it to you, it's not yours. It's still mine. Unless you kill me, this thing will become yours." The black-robed old man laughed when he heard Nietian's words. "Kid, you're smarter than I thought. It seems that you're certain that I won't dare to kill you, which is why you dare to speak to me like this." Nietian faintly smiled and did not deny it. The black-robed old man's strength was indeed shocking. However, after he arrived, apart from being a little arrogant, he did not reveal any killing intent. If he really wanted to make a move, Niedao would be either dead or seriously injured. Nietian had not expected such a terrifying fellow to be hiding in the 9 major realms. The black-robed old man had only come for the Book of 9 Primordial Elements. He had no intention of attacking Nietian. Therefore, Nietian felt that he was a reasonable fellow. More importantly, Nietian sensed an extremely mysterious aura from the black-robed old man. Moreover, the flames that the black-robed old man used gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity, even intimacy. The black-robed old man's identity puzzled Nietian greatly, and he had a few speculations. Next, Nietian's figure moved and arrived beside Niedao. He looked at the black-robed old man and said indifferently, "I can give it to you, but I have a condition. You want to negotiate with me?" The black-robed old man's lips twitched slightly, as if he was smiling. "Let's hear it. You said that I don't understand it, so you should be able to understand it." Nietian raised his eyebrows and said, "I'd like to know what's recorded in it." The black-robed old man's eyes narrowed slightly. He hesitated for a moment, then laughed and asked, "The Book of 9 Primordial Elements is in the form of a map, right?" "Yes." Nietian nodded. The Book of 9 Primordial Elements was indeed in the form of a map. According to Fat Cat, the Book of 9 Primordial Elements existed in many ways, and the map was only one of them. The black-robed old man smiled faintly and said, "You are from the Nye family. You should be interested in what is recorded on the map." "You can say that." Nietian nodded. He thought for a moment and said, "I want to know where the heart of all wood is." The map of the Book of 9 Primordial Elements recorded the distribution of the 9 great origins. However, neither Nietian nor Fat Cat could decipher the map, so they did not know the distribution of the 9 great origins. The heart of all wood? The black-robed old man was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled and said, "Shouldn't the Nye family be interested in the beginning light realm? Why are you interested in the heart of all wood? Are you going to use the heart of all wood to save someone?" The black-robed old man's casual words hit the nail on the head. "This is my business. It has nothing to do with you." Nietian frowned and replied coldly. This black-robed old man really knew a lot. He was actually so familiar with the 9 great families. Take out the book of 9 primordial elements, the black-robed old man said with a serious expression. Nyetian thought for a moment. Without hesitation, he took out the book of 9 primordial elements and threw it to the black-robed old man. It really is the book of 9 primordial elements. The black-robed old man caught the book of 9 primordial elements, and his eyes lit up. Immediately, he opened the book of 9 primordial elements and flicked his finger. A beam of light flowed into the book of 9 primordial elements. Chapter 2459. Up in the sky, the black-clothed man released a ray of light that entered the book of 9 primordial. Is not equal to following this. The book of 9 primordial sensed something, and a wondrous scene took place. The book of 9 primordial slowly expanded while emitting countless rainbow-colored specks of light that circulated in the air. The scene was dazzling and beautiful. Nyetian was stunned by the scene in front of him, and his expression froze. It seemed like the black-clothed old man was extremely familiar with the book of 9 primordial and knew many of its secrets. A moment later, a colorful map appeared in the space above the book of 9 primordial. It was extremely mysterious. "Kid, do you see it?" The black-clothed old man smiled and glanced at Nyetian proudly. "This is the correct way to open the book of 9 primordial." Nyetian frowned as his eyes flickered. He sensed the map in front of him and discovered that it was a vast map that seemed to contain all the worlds. The 9 realms, the Julie demonic realm, and even the abandoned land were all on the map. At the same time, outside of some of the specks of light was a gray area. Nyetian tried to sense it, but he couldn't sense anything. "Kid, this is a map drawn by the Holy Book. It's extremely mysterious." The black-clothed old man seemed to know what Nyetian was doing. He smiled and said, "The Holy Book's map is different in everyone's eyes. All the places you know or have been to will be lit up on the Holy Book's map. As for the places you don't know or haven't been to, they will be gray on the map. No matter how powerful your senses are, you won't be able to sense anything in those gray areas." "That's amazing." Nyetian frowned and exclaimed after hearing the old man's words. Niedao also had a strange expression. The world he could see only had the 9 realms. There was no Gili demonic realm or the abandoned land. The black-clothed old man laughed and said, "The mysteries of the Holy Book are far more than that. Unfortunately, you're still too weak. Even if I show it to you, you won't understand it." Nyetian frowned even more and asked with an ugly expression, "Where's the thing I'm looking for? Myriad with spirit heart?" The corner of the black-robed old man's mouth twitched as he said reluctantly, "The heart of all wood is not in the 9 major realms. You shouldn't waste your time on it. Not in the 9 realms." Nyetian was taken aback, and his heart sank. If the spirit heart of all wood wasn't in one of the 9 major realms, didn't that mean that he would have to go to another realm to find it? In the next moment, Nyetian fixed his gaze and asked again, "Where's the spiritual heart of all wood? Do you really want to know?" The black-clothed old man looked at Nyetian with a strange expression as he asked in a deep voice. "Yes." Nyetian nodded heavily. "Very well, come with me." The black-robed old man smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Nyetian, seeing that the black-clothed old man wanted to take Nyetian away, Niedao immediately became vigilant and cried out in alarm. However, Nyetian's reaction was extremely calm. He turned around to look at Niedao and said with a faint smile, "Grandfather, don't worry. I'll be fine. Alliance leader Nye, you worry too much." The black-clothed old man glanced at Niedao and said with a faint smile, "If I wanted to harm him, would he still be alive?" Niedao's eyes darkened, and his expression turned ugly. Although the black-clothed old man's words were arrogant, they were the truth. With his strength, if he were to attack Nyetian, the latter would have been a corpse long ago. Nyetian nodded solemnly and no longer tried to stop him. "Let's go," the black-clothed old man said indifferently. With a flicker of his body, he left with Nyetian. Niedao's expression was extremely solemn as he watched the 2 figures leave. He didn't expect such a terrifying expert like the black-clothed old man to be hiding in the 9 major realms. High up in the sky, Nietion and the black-clothed old man moved like lightning. Soon, the two arrived above the Nine Heavens mountain range and landed in a hidden valley within the mountain range. "Old mister, if you have something to say, please say it." Nietion smiled calmly and said to the black-clothed old man with a burning gaze, "My surname is Hua. You can call me Elder Hua." The black-clothed old man smiled faintly and asked, "How should I address you, young friend?" Nietion responded calmly in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. This Elder Hua seemed to be extremely interested in Nietion. His eyes were fixated on Nietion, as if he was trying to see through Nietion. "Elder Hua, what did you see?" Nietion smiled faintly and asked straightforwardly. Elder Hua let out a chuckle and said without embarrassment, "Young friend Nietion, you are indeed an extraordinary person. No wonder the Book of Nine Primordial is willing to recognize you as its master." "What do you mean?" Nietion was a little confused. Elder Hua smiled faintly and asked in return, "Do you think just anyone can leave a mark on the Book of Nine Primordial and have it recognize you as its master?" Nietion was once again taken aback. His expression became even more confused. Could it be that the Book of Nine Primordial has its own consciousness and is choosing its master? Elder Hua waved his hand and did not say anything else. Then he took a step forward and flicked his finger. A ray of light appeared and entered Nietion's demonic eye. "What did you do to me?" Nietion suddenly felt the demonic eye heat up, as if one of the eyeballs was about to burst into flames. He couldn't help but scream. "Just bear with it for a while, and you will understand soon." Elder Hua smiled, a little pleased with himself. After a while, Nietion felt the heat in his eyes weaken, and he tried to open his eyes. Right now, before him was the map of the Book of Nine Primordial. When he saw the map in front of him, his expression changed to one of astonishment. At this moment, the map in front of him was much bigger and clearer than before. It was as if every dot of light on the map was reflected in his eyes. Take a good look and remember every dot of light. Use your holographic divine runes to construct a holographic image. Elder Hua smiled faintly, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. He didn't expect Nietion to accept the Nine Primordial Light so quickly. It had far exceeded his expectations. Looks like this little guy has completely merged with the Primordial Starstone. That's why he can accept the Nine Primordial Light so quickly. Elder Hua thought to himself. A faint smile appeared on his face as he said, "Looks like the Primordial Starstone has found its right master." The light he had released earlier was the Nine Primordial Light, which contained the 9 elements. It was basically impossible for ordinary warriors to accept the 9 elemental light. Only peak experts with powerful bloodlines could accept the 9 elemental light. Elder Hua was very surprised that Nietion could accept the 9 primordial light so quickly. The demonic eye had fused with the power of the 9 primordial light, and its perceptive abilities had improved qualitatively. Most importantly, the demonic eye could see a wider map of the 9 primordial world. At this moment, Nietion discovered that outside of the 9 primordial realms, there were countless realms of different sizes, twinkling like stars in the sky. He didn't expect so many realms to exist outside of the 9 primordial worlds. But he quickly discovered that the 9 primordial worlds were at the center of the map. The other realms were like guards surrounding the 9 primordial worlds. Judging from their positions, the 9 primordial worlds seemed to be the core of the map. QL 11. Chapter 2460. The Heart of 10,000 Wood. Nietion looked at the green dot and felt a strong wood elemental aura. He couldn't help but exclaim. This was simply too strange. The light spots on the map could actually release different auras. You're smart. That's where the Heart of 10,000 Wood is. Elder Hua smiled calmly. The Book of 9 Primordial can sense almost all the realms. The things marked on the map will release their auras according to the senses. As he spoke, Elder Hua pointed at the red, gold, white, and other light spots and said, "These light spots are the other origins." Nietion's eyes widened slightly as he exclaimed, "They're all in the 9 realms. Aside from the green origin of wood, All of the other origin powers were in the 9 realms. And yet Tion found it strange. There were so many realms, but the 9 origins were all in the 9 realms. Even the heart of 10,000 wood was in a realm not far away from the 9 realms. It was as if the 9 origins had agreed to stay in the 9 realms. Looks like you've noticed. Elder Hua smiled and said, the 9 great powers are all concentrated in the 9 realms. Tion nodded and asked, why is that? Haven't you noticed? The 9 realms are at the center of all the realms. Elder Hua smiled and looked at Tion. These realms have another name. They're called the 10,000 realms. The 9 realms are the core of the 10,000 realms. Legend has it that the 10,000 realms were formed when a sacred realm collapsed. The 9 origins were left in the 9 core realms. Over the past several million years, many mysterious organizations have been searching for the 9 great origin powers. Unfortunately, the 9 great origin powers are extremely well hidden. Furthermore, they will change locations from time to time. That's why no one has been able to find the 9 origins. Yet Tion frowned slightly. He couldn't help but chuckle inside. Why did he feel that it was rather easy for him to obtain origin energy? Elder Hua looked at Tion and seemed to know what the latter was thinking. He said, I have to say, you are really lucky to be able to fuse with the complete origin of darkness. Then, Senior Hua said, the book of 9 primordial elements is yours. However, if it is in your hands now, it will bring you endless danger. After all, I am not the only one who can sense the book of 9 primordial elements. I'm only temporarily keeping the book of 9 primordial elements for you. When the time is right, I will naturally return it to you. Yet Tion narrowed his eyes and frowned. Why are you helping me? Elder Hua was right. Since the 9 great source energies were so precious, the book of 9 primordial elements was also a priceless treasure. It would definitely attract countless enemies. Those who could sense the book of 9 primordial elements were definitely no ordinary individuals. QL11 thus, to Tion, not only was the book of 9 primes not a good item, it was also a misfortune item that would attract disaster. Elder Hua asked Tion to hand over the book of 9 primordial elements, but he was only temporarily keeping it for him. This was no different from helping him. However, Tion did not understand. He did not know Elder Hua, so why would the latter help him? I'm not helping you. I'm helping myself. Elder Hua smiled and said mysteriously, helping yourself? Tion was taken aback. Then he frowned and asked, who are you? I can't reveal my identity right now. But don't worry, I'm definitely not your enemy. Elder Hua smiled calmly. His eyes were very calm. Tion stared at the mysterious elder, trying to find a flaw in the latter's eyes. Unfortunately, he didn't sense anything. Elder Hua's words should be true. Have you memorized the map of 9 primordial elements? Elder Hua asked with a smile. Yes. Tion nodded. While he was speaking, he had already secretly engraved a holographic projection of the map of 9 primordial elements. He already knew that the realm that bordered the 9 territories, where the heart of 10,000 wood was called the Frozen Ruins. Very good. Elder Hua smiled and put away the map of 9 primordial elements. Then, he looked at Tion and asked, are you going to the Frozen Ruins next? Tion nodded and said solemnly, the heart of 10,000 wood is very important to me. I must find it. Looks like you want to use the heart of 10,000 wood to save someone important. Elder Hua's lips twitched. Let me give you a suggestion. Find someone from the Yu family to go with you. It will be helpful for you to find the heart of 10,000 wood. Tion's eyes narrowed. Then, he nodded and said, thank you. I will find someone. The Yu family had been sent to the 9 territories by the Juying Shrine to find the heart of 10,000 wood. There must be some special relationship between the Yu family and the heart of 10,000 wood. Elder Hua nodded and flipped his palm. A space-time vortex appeared in his palm. He took out a scroll and sealed the space-time vortex into the scroll. Tion was stunned. He was amazed by Elder Hua's extraordinary means. Elder Hua smiled and handed the scroll to Tion. He said, this is the space-time power I took from the book of 9 primordial elements. I have made it into a space-time scroll. As long as you enter the connection between the God Exclusion Zone and the Frozen Ruins, this scroll will help you break through the void and enter the Frozen Ruins. Thank you, Elder Hua. Nietion took the space-time scroll and thanked him. That's all I can do to help you. You will have to rely on yourself. Elder Hua smiled. Then, his lips twitched into a strange smile. He said, "You have a guest coming. I will leave now. I won't disturb you. Good luck." Then, Elder Hua's body moved. He turned into a beam of light and disappeared. Guest? Nietion was stunned. He didn't understand what Elder Hua meant. But the next moment, he felt that something was wrong. His face changed. At the same time, a dozen figures in black appeared outside the valley. Their auras were powerful. They were all paramount gods. There were even a few peak paramount gods. So these are the guests. Nye Tianling smiled coldly. He moved and appeared outside the valley. His gaze swept across the dozen or so black-clothed cultivators. When he felt their killing intent, not only did he not feel fear, but his lips curled into a cold smile. He said indifferently, "You think you can kill me with just you? Kill." The martial artists in black didn't waste any time. They roared and attacked. Boom, boom, boom. More than a dozen terrifying attacks roared out. They were so powerful that they could overturn rivers and seas. They pressed down on Nietion. Nietion didn't show the slightest fear as he slightly raised his hand. Even though it was a simple movement, it carried a tremendous momentum. Boom! In the next moment, he slammed his palm down. The shadow of his palm was like a mountain. It exploded. Bang! 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 Then, a series of muffled sounds came from the sky. One by one, the figures in black were sent flying. The trees and rocks in the surroundings were destroyed. The ground cracked, and a cloud of dust rose. Like a mountain, Nietion stood there unwaveringly. His eyes shone with a frosty light as he said in a wild voice, "You dare to kill me with such strength?" These men in black weren't weak. In fact, they were very strong. Unfortunately, their opponent was Nietion. Then, Nietion took a step forward. He was full of killing intent. Chapter 2461. Nine Heavens Mountain Range, outside the valley. Nietion approached step by step. With every step he took, the killing intent on his body intensified. The group of men in black was terrified. It was as though their hearts were in their throats. Boom! However, right at this moment, the void suddenly trembled and a powerful force appeared, whistling through the air towards Nietion. Nietion frowned slightly. The astral soul wings appeared on his back. He retreated a few hundred meters and leaped into the sky. Boom! The next moment, a terrifying force landed. A huge crater appeared on the ground, and the ground cracked 1,000 meters wide. In the next moment, the mountain valley behind Nietion collapsed. The force of a palm was extremely majestic. The person who came was an expert. Nietion's figure froze as he looked at the ghost-masked cultivator in the sky. His lips curled into a faint smile as he said in a deep voice, "You're the one who wants to kill me, right? Ren Quanchen?" His voice was cold, and every word was filled with killing intent. Nietion's eyes were filled with intense killing intent. Even though the man was wearing a ghost mask, Nietion couldn't possibly mistake his aura for someone else. The person who came was the Deputy Chief of Wind and Cloud Alliance, Ren Quanchen. "Brat, you still remember I." The masked martial artist sneered. The mask on his face cracked and disappeared in the air, revealing his real face. It was Ren Quanchen. "Old man, you can't hide your fox's tail anymore." Nietion Tianling smiled coldly. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Actually, Nietion had his suspicions about Ren Quanchen since a long time ago. The last time he came to Wind and Cloud Alliance, Ren Quanchen attacked him. No matter how he tried to explain, Ren Quanchen didn't let him off and even revealed his killing intent. If Niet Dao didn't arrive in time, Nietion would be in deep trouble. At that time, Nietion had his suspicions about Ren Quanchen. However, he wasn't sure, so he didn't tell Niet Dao. He didn't expect Ren Quanchen to be so arrogant. He was still in Nine Heavens Mountain, and Ren Quanchen already wanted to attack him. "Kid, you're pretty calm," Ren Quanchen said coldly. His eyes were like a hawk's, glinting coldly as he stared at Nyetian. I'm calm because I know that you can't kill me with your strength, Nyetian replied indifferently. His calm voice was filled with incomparable arrogance. Arrogant, Rin Quanchen roared. Rage and killing intent coexisted in his eyes. He said coldly, Brat, compared to before, your strength has indeed increased a lot. But in Ai's eyes, you are still an ant. Killing you is as easy as flipping my palm. Rin Quanshan said it casually, but he was very surprised and even shocked in his heart. The last time he had seen Yetian was roughly a month ago, when the latter had been a mid-paramount god. And now, he was a late paramount god. This kind of increase in strength was even more abnormal than abnormal. Generally speaking, even the most talented of warriors would need hundreds or even thousands of years to reach the paramount god level. But Nyetian had made breakthroughs in a single month. Compared to Nyetian, all other geniuses paled in comparison. Is that so? Nyetian said, grinning provocatively. Then why don't you try to backhand me? How impudent! The naked provocation caused Rin Quanshan to be enraged. With a low roar, his figure suddenly moved, and he directly sent out a palm strike. QL 11-inch boom. Suddenly, a terrifying palm shadow appeared in the air, like a berserk dragon, roaring crazily. Upon seeing this, Nyetian's expression flickered slightly. He also thrust his palm out, and three bone-eroding soul-shackling chains shot out, entwined with each other, and shot forward. Boom! The two forces collided, and an endless amount of power exploded, wreaking havoc in the air. In the next moment, Nyetian felt a violent force bearing down on him, and knocked him back by 1,000 meters. He stabilized himself in midair, blood oozing out of the corner of his mouth. Rin Quanshan was the Deputy League Lord of the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He was at the peak of half-step, even stronger than 7 kills. Furthermore, the bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains had no effect on him. Oomph. Seeing that Nyetian was injured, Rin Quanshan sneered and said arrogantly, Brat, you're good at talking, but it's a pity that your strength is lacking. Is that so? Nyetian wiped the blood from his mouth and smiled cold. The majestic dragon, Qi, surged out of his body. Dragon Qi. Seeing this, Rin Quanshan's eyes sank. He then smiled. Brat, I never expected you to possess the dragon's vein. Looks like I've underestimated you. Nyetian's mouth twitched, but he didn't say anything. Instead, the dragon Qi in his body surged to the limit. Brat, you're worthy of using my full strength. Rin Quanshan smiled cold. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, he looked playful. In the next moment, his body shook, and his aura surged to the limit. Waves of violent energy surged out, and the space within 10,000 meters tightened. Old man, you talk too much. Nyetian roared. The dragon Qi around him moved, and 1,000 meters long crimson dragon appeared. Its body was entangled by the terrifying, bone-eroding, soul-shackling chains. The boundless might of the dragon shook the heavens and the earth. Roar dash! The dragon roared, and its terrifying body rolled out. The soul-refining flame burned to the limit, and the surging energy shot out in all directions. Rin Quanshan's expression changed when he felt the powerful dragon might. He didn't expect Nyetian's strength to reach such a terrifying level. However, he calmed down in an instant. His face darkened, and his aura surged. Waves of energy gathered in the air and formed a black python. Boom! The black python moved like a dragon, and like a huge bolt of black lightning, it smashed down on Nyetian. At the same time, the crimson dragon arrived. Its huge body seemed small and weak compared to the black python. Boom! In the next instant, the crimson dragon and the black python collided with each other, causing a thunderous boom to ring out in the air. Space froze for a moment before violent shockwaves spread out in all directions, forming violent ripples in the air. PSSSD, PSSSD, PSSSD. An ear-piercing sound came from the void. Waves of violent energy surged out, and Nyetian and Rin Quanshan were completely submerged. The terrifying power spread to the ground, and the ground cracked for 1,000 meters. Rocks were everywhere, and it was a real scene of a landslide. The dozen or so black-garbed martial artists looked up at the sky in a daze. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. They didn't expect Nyetian, a late-stage paramount god, to have such terrifying power. If Nyetian had used his full strength when fighting them, these black-garbed martial artists would have died. At this moment, the black-garbed martial artists finally realized how terrifying Nyetian was. He had subverted their understanding of martial arts. After a long time, the wild waves in the sky gradually dissipated, and two figures appeared. It was Nyetian and Rinquanshin. At this time, the two of them were also standing in the sky, but the situation was completely different. Rinquanshin's face was pale, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Chapter 2462. The dozen or so black-garbed cultivators stared up at the two figures in the sky, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. They couldn't imagine that Nyetian could survive a head-on clash with Rinquanshin. Although Nyetian appeared to be gravely injured, his aura was very stable. Clearly, he hadn't suffered any fatal injuries. But how was that possible? Rinquanshin was a half-step peak expert, while Nyetian was only a late-stage paramount god. All of the black-robed martial artists looked at Nyetian with fear and apprehension in their eyes. Nyetian's fearsomeness was beyond their imagination. Nyetian, Rinquanshin said, his eyes even colder. You're indeed a fiend god nascent embryo cultivator. I can't believe you survived Ai's attack. Nyetian's body shook, and the bloodstains on his body were washed away. A smile appeared on his handsome face as he sneered. Rinquanshin, is this what you call as easy as flipping your hand? Before the battle, Rinquanshin had boasted that killing Nyetian would be as easy as flipping his hand. But the result was that he had to fight Nyetian to this point. Rinquanshin's as easy as flipping his hand was laughable. Nyetian was at a disadvantage in the head-on clash, but that wasn't embarrassing. Rinquanshin was a half-step peak expert, the deputy leader of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, and a well-known expert in the 9 major realms. It was already very good that Nyetian was able to last this long while fighting against such a powerful expert. Kid, you're too arrogant. The corner of Rinquanshin's mouth twitched, and the muscles on his face twitched. His aura surged, and the air was filled with a strange, evil aura. Nyetian's expression changed when he sensed the aura. Rinquanshin had used his bloodline power to condense the profound black python just now. But now, he seemed to have fused his bloodline power with some kind of evil art, exploding with even more terrifying power. Boy, even a real expert at the peak of the god state would find it hard to withstand Ai's attack. Rinquanshin's aura continued to surge as he said coldly, "Just obediently accept your death." Really? At this moment, the corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. A strange smile appeared on his face as he said, "Rinquanshin, do you still have a chance to attack?" Rinquanshin frowned in confusion. But in the next moment, his expression suddenly changed, and there was actually a trace of fear. "Kid, consider yourself lucky this time. We'll meet again someday." Following which, Rinquanshin's aura suddenly dissipated. After glaring at Nyetian hatefully, his silhouette flashed and he left. "Rinquanshin, I will remember you." Nyetian let out a faint smile. His eyes were filled with firm murderous intent as he said in a deep voice, "The next time we meet, I will definitely kill you." Nyetian. As soon as he finished speaking, a figure appeared from the void and landed next to him. "Grandpa." Nyetian looked at the person and said with a faint smile, "I'm fine." The person who had just arrived was Niedao. It was obvious that Niedao had purposely released his aura to intimidate Rinquanshin. However, it was a pity that Rinquanshin was scared away. Niedao used his divine sense to check Nyetian's body. After confirming that the latter was fine, he was relieved. "Nyetian, what's going on?" Niedao calmed down and asked in a deep voice. Nyetian told him everything that had happened, and then told him about what had happened before. After hearing Nyetian's words, Nye Dao's eyes darkened. He let out a deep roar and unleashed his aura. Damn it, this Ren Quanshan betrayed the Wind and Cloud Alliance. He never thought that Ren Quanshan would want to kill Nye Tian. Without a doubt, Ren Quanshan had betrayed the Wind and Cloud Alliance. Nye Tian, what do you think Ren Quanshan's true identity is? Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he asked with murderous intent. I don't know either. Nye Tian shook his head and said, I'm guessing that Ren Quanshan is from a holy parliament or forbidden scale. Ren Quanshan knew about the dragon vein and the demon god embryo. Therefore, it was hard to determine his identity. However, Nye Tian could only think of two organizations, the Holy Council and the Reverse Scale. The nets and nets above and earth would not attack Nye Tian, and the Heaven-Punishing Alliance would not have someone like Ren Quanshan. I understand. Nye Dao let out a deep breath. He could not hide the worry on his face. He glanced at Nye Tian and said, Fortunately, you're fine. Grandpa, don't worry too much. Nye Tian knew what Nye Dao was worried about. He smiled faintly and said with a firm gaze, Give me some more time. I will grow up. Nye Dao was definitely worried about the Holy Parliament and Heaven-Punishing Alliance. Ren Quanshan, one of the two Vice Alliance leaders of the Wind and Cloud Alliance, had betrayed them. This indirectly showed that the Wind and Cloud Alliance was in a precarious situation. After thinking for a while, Nye Dao decided to keep a low profile and not announce Ren Quanshan's betrayal. After all, Ren Quanshan was the Vice Alliance leader and held a high position in the alliance. If news of his betrayal were spread, it would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to the stability of the entire Wind and Cloud Alliance. At this moment, Nye Dao already felt powerless. Even though he was a peak godly state expert, his power was limited. Facing enemies from all sides, the pressure he felt was unimaginable. Now, the only person who could change the situation and share the pressure for Nye Dao was Nye Tian. Nye Dao believed that as long as Nye Tian grew up, all the problems would be solved. Next, Nye Tian followed Nye Dao back to the Wind and Cloud Alliance to recuperate. 3 days later, Nye Tian left Nine Heavens City and headed towards Jade Maple City. Jade Maple City was the city where the Yu family was located. Half a day later, 3 figures appeared outside Jade Maple City. It was Nye Tian, Jun Aoqing, and Nye Qingwan. Nye Tian did not want to bring Nye Qingwan along, but the latter insisted on staying with the little ice cube. Nye Tian had no choice but to bring Nye Qingwan along. He had the 9 extremities with him, so it was very convenient for him to bring Nye Qingwan along. Nye Tian, we're almost at Jade Maple City. I'll enter the 9 extremities first. Nye Qingwan chuckled and said, If I'm out for too long, the little ice cube will miss me. Nye Tian's face darkened, but he still let Nye Qingwan enter the 9 extremities. Nye Tian, little sister Qingwan, said that she can talk to EMO. Do you believe it? After Nye Qingwan entered the 9 extremities, Jun Aoqing suddenly said to Nye Tian, Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, That little girl must be crazy. Doesn't seem like it. Jun Aoqing shook her head and said with a serious expression, I've seen it before. Little sister Qingwan really is talking to EMO. Nye Tian frowned and couldn't help but take it seriously. EMO was sealed in the frost demon cocoon. Shouldn't his consciousness be in a coma? How could Nye Qingwan communicate with someone whose consciousness was in a coma? Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Just as Nye Tian was bewildered, Fat Cat's scream suddenly sounded in his consciousness. Fat, what did you say is impossible? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment and couldn't help but ask. Right now, Fat Cat's expression seemed to be very surprised and even a little panicked. Nye Tian looked puzzled. He rarely saw Fat Cat with this expression. What did Fat Cat discover that made her so excited? Chapter 2463. Nye Tian saw Fat Cat's dazed expression and felt even more puzzled. He asked again, Fat, what did you discover? It seemed that Fat Cat had discovered something. It should be about Nye Qingwan. After being dazed for more than 10 seconds, Fat Cat finally reacted. With a puzzled face, it muttered to itself, Is that little girl really a member of the sacred clan? A member of the sacred clan? Qingwan? The confusion on Nye Tian's face deepened as he asked in astonishment. Nye Tian, how much do you know about that little girl? Fat Cat did not answer Nye Tian's question, but asked instead. Qingwan? Nye Tian was a little confused. He was not even sure if the little girl Fat Cat was talking about was Nye Qingwan. Yes. Fat Cat nodded repeatedly and was very anxious. I only know that Qingwan is fifth uncle's daughter. I don't know anything else. Nye Tian frowned slightly and said with a puzzled expression. Fat Cat said that Nye Qingwan was a member of the sacred clan. This made Nye Tian very puzzled. Since Nye Qingwan could integrate with the power of Light Source, it meant that she was a member of the Nye family. How did she become a member of the sacred clan? Do you know the little girl's mother? Fat Cat asked excitedly. I don't know. Nye Tian shook his head helplessly. Not to mention Nye Qingwan's mother. He had not even seen Nye Qingwan's father, his fifth uncle. Fat Cat frowned and fell silent again. Fat, what is going on? Nye Tian could not help but ask with a frown. Fat Cat calmed down a lot and said, Nye Tian, if the little girl can really communicate with EMO, it means that she is a member of the sacred clan. Why? Nye Tian's gaze tightened as he asked. EMO is a member of the wings of the Frost Demon clan, a descendant of the sacred clan. Even if he is sealed in the Frost Demon cocoon, he can still communicate with outsiders, Fat Cat said in a low voice. However, he can only communicate with the sacred clan. Well, Nye Tian frowned when he heard what the Fat Cat said. How could he have imagined that things would turn out like this? Could it be that Nye Qingwan's identity was really complicated? My guess is that the little girl's mother is definitely a member of the sacred race. That's why she possesses the bloodline of the sacred race and is able to communicate with that winged race member. Fat Cat nodded as a strange look flashed in her eyes. Looks like your cousin's identity isn't simple. Nye Tian exhaled deeply, still unable to conceal the shock on his face. No wonder Nye Qingwan's talent was so high. So this was the reason. However, all of this was just Fat Cat's guess. It couldn't be confirmed yet. When he had time, Nye Tian was prepared to pay a proper visit to his fifth uncle. Nye Tian, don't think too much. If that little girl is really a member of the sacred clan, it's not a bad thing for you. Fat Cat chuckled, then became quiet and didn't speak anymore. Nye Tian nodded slightly, the corner of his mouth raised in a smile. Having a cousin from the sacred clan wasn't too bad either. No wonder Nye Qingwan was so enthusiastic and interested when she first saw EMO. Nye Tian, are you okay? June Ouching saw the change in Nye Tian's expression and couldn't help but ask. Of course, she didn't know the conversation between Nye Tian and Fat Cat. Nye Tian nodded slightly and told her what had happened just now. After listening, June Ouching was stunned and only reacted after a long time. She really didn't expect Nye Qingwan to have such a powerful background. Ouching, let's enter the city. Nye Tian smiled and didn't think too much about it. He strode toward Jade Maple City. A moment later, Nye Tian and June Ouching arrived at the main street of Jade Maple City. Jade Maple City wasn't the main city of the God Prohibition region, but it was still very big, with a radius of 1,000 miles. June Ouching walked on the street and looked at the dazzling array of goods, appearing very excited. She was from the Abandoned Land and lived in the Sacred Heaven Sword Union since she was young. She rarely went out, so this lively scene was rare. Most importantly, Nye Tian was by her side now. We're not in a hurry. Let's take a look first. Nye Tian looked at June Ouching and said with a faint smile. The two strolled around Jade Maple City. June Ouching bought a lot of things and was very happy. Nye Tian held June Ouching's hand and walked on the street with a smile on his face. He hadn't enjoyed this kind of leisure in a long time. Everyone in front, get out of the way. However, at this moment, a violent voice suddenly sounded, followed by a violent aura. The sudden change made Nye Tian's eyes slightly narrow. He reacted almost subconsciously, and the extreme Yang Sky armor lit up on his body. Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, a muffled sound came out, and the surrounding people were knocked to the sides. QL 11 boom. The violent aura hit Nye Tian's body, but it was blocked by the extreme Yang Sky armor and directly shattered. Who dares to block the third young master's path? Then a violent roar sounded, and a black-clothed martial artist appeared with a violent aura. The surrounding people retreated and looked at the black-clothed martial artists in horror. Nietian stood there without moving. His gaze swept across the black-clothed martial artists, and then locked onto a purple-clothed youth at the back. It was obvious that this purple-clothed youth was the third young master that the black-clothed martial artist spoke of. One had to admit that this pair of master and servant were really arrogant to directly attack on the street. Strangely, everyone in the surroundings distanced themselves from the purple-clothed youth, as if afraid to approach him. Fortunately, the street was large enough, at least a few hundred meters wide. Otherwise, no one would know where to hide. At this moment, the crowd's gazes were also attracted by the purple-clothed youth, and they began to discuss. Who is this guy? He's so arrogant. This street doesn't belong to him. What right does he have to tell us to get out of the way? Don't talk so much. This is the Yu family's third young master, Yu Qinglang. The entire Jade Maple City belongs to the Yu family, and this street doesn't belong to the third young master. He's young master Yu Qinglang. No wonder he's so overbearing. The crowd knew the identity of the purple-clothed youth, and the shock on their faces intensified. They couldn't help but retreat. In Jade Maple City, everyone knew the name of Yu Qinglang, and he was famous for being extremely arrogant and despotic. Yu Qinglang had a strange habit, and he didn't like people getting within 10 meters of him. Therefore, every time he came out, there would be people specially assigned to clear the way and clear the streets of people who didn't have anything to do with him. According to the rumors, Yu Qinglang had once killed an entire family of people who stood in his way. At this moment, the eyes of the purple-robed young man, Yu Qinglang, were also fixed on Nietian. He seemed a little surprised, but his surprise was soon replaced by killing intent. Yu Qinglang, had a rule. No matter who it was, as long as they stood in his way, he would kill them. Nietian's brows furrowed slightly as he sensed Yu Qinglang's strength. A disdainful smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Yu Qinglang wasn't strong, and only had the strength of a mid-stage paramount god. In Nietian's eyes, this kind of strength was weak as hell. The three black-clothed martial artists in front of Yu Qinglang were only late-stage paramount gods, and they posed no threat to Nietian at all.